All right, we're back. After a Windows update destroyed my streaming setup by automatically installing cloud syncing on my computer without my consent and moving all my files, which I then had to move back after they broke everything, we're here. Welcome aboard again. I fixed the ship up. We're ready to sail. Asymptomatic, welcome back. Let me just post the previous archive and then put the going live notification on it. And we'll be right as rain. Today we're going to kill Rennala and unlock the ability to respec. And that's really good. But I don't feel like we actually have that many levels worth of level to do the thing. Yeah, I don't feel like we're actually going to get that much out of that. But it's just good to have, and it gives us runes, you know, levels. I won't be using the gear because it's all intelligence gear too. So it's also not much of a loss to convert all of the spoils from killing Rennala into runes. So welcome back. That's what we're going to do today. Pretty straightforward. I'm hoping that we also get to spend some time getting new status incantations, but I guess we just get to spend some time using them too, which is good. I'm going to look at where we are on the checklist because we have a lot of... I don't think we have Poison Moth Flight. I feel like I added a bunch of stuff that we don't actually have. Classic. But it should be right after Radigan Icon, which is the casting speed thing that we just got. There's a lot of stuff really close to where we are in progression that's really fun for this build. So it would be good to... It'll probably be easy. We'll knock Rennala out real quick. And then we'll be in business. Level 44. That's not that high. Ooh, I don't know. These stats are a little sussy looking. Okay. Yeah, let's just go, I guess. Let's see how it goes. Can't be too bad. I think last time, did we kill that one guy at the end of this bridge? I don't really remember. Because it's been 2 weeks ago, which for me, I don't know how most of your experience has been, but for me, 2 weeks is like a year lately. Like, there's way too much stuff happening all the time. Even just my personal life alone, you know, I'm not even talking about the news, which I don't really see there's being a huge amount of a point to following closely anymore. You need another way to digest what's going on in the world. Joink. Joink is what I say instead of juke. We did not kill this guy. Okay. That's going to be interesting with this build. Here we go! This is what we're doing. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So the damage is really, really there, you know? I think we can all agree. The damage, not too worried about it, right? That's, yeah. Flask up. Let's get, the Frost Breath. Juke. Get some space. Carrion Butt Blast. And we get him with one of those. We get him with one of these. We get him with one of those. We get him with one of these. Oh. Boots. Okay, just barely ran out of range of that guy. Juke him a little. Oh, just in time. So close. This guy can be pretty nasty if you are bad at the game like me. It's not that bad for normal players, but for me, yeah. We still gotta use this breath. I'm really looking forward to having more casting speed. Yeah, is it this guy that parries? There's somebody around here who will do a big parry on you, and that can be a big issue. I guess more for melee builds. Like, it's not a huge deal here. I'm gonna finish him with a claw. We really need ways to cast better. I know I was talking about that before. Yep. Oh wait, I want to open butts. There's a shortcut. And right up there is the boss. That wasn't too bad. First try with this build. I did this recently on another playthrough, though. So I can't take too much credit. And I have, like, no flasks or anything now, so might as well go. chonk up for the war. Okay. It's fine. Doesn't really matter because we needed to go heal anyway. I just wanted that item. And then we'll go do the deed, as it were. Yeah, I mean, the build's damage is really good, so maybe it's fine, but I don't have very much health. I think that's the biggest thing. I feel like this is probably a good matchup overall against Rennala, though. That might be wrong, but I think overall it's probably fine. Okay, yep, yeah. This is maybe my least favorite place in the entire game, like that, the switchback we were at right there. It's just like one of the places where these projectile spamming enemies are on a few too many banisters. Like, that's just kind of annoying. And there are some moments, it's one of those things in games where, like, it's hard, but the difficulty is of the kind where 20% of the time attacks will happen in an order where it is impossible to dodge them all, you know? I find that it's kind of hard to prevent in game design, but I find that a very frustrating type of challenge, if you want to call it that, in games. Yeah, let's get more health. How about that? And this build is also like, we would benefit a lot from a rune arc, but I'm pretty sure I only have one. So let's try it without it and see how it goes, and then I'll add it later, because I don't have a great feeling about how this is gonna go on the first try. Also, are these weapons upgraded at all? Not really. Okay, good talk. Yeah. Asymptomatic, welcome back. 100% less Windows chicanery is an ambitious figure. 100% less, is that what I actually said? That's a heckin' joke. Yeah, no, of course not. But I don't know, man, like, I just feel like it's not that hard. Like, all you have to do is not force me to implement things that move my files for me. That's all you have to do, and then I'll just keep using the operating system because I don't want to spend the time to switch to something else right now. But instead, they chose death. They said, well, we're going to mess up your system so that it would almost be more convenient for you to switch. Okay, you can do that. It seems like kind of a shame. I just think that's really frustrating. But we live in that bad of a world right now, unfortunately, so. You know, or that good of a world where, like, there are alternatives, so I guess it's not that bad. But I mean, you said, I don't see much of a point in following the news anymore either, since I have already 100%ed Silksong myself. That's what we were referring to, right? That's right. The main point of the news is that you can know if Silksong is out yet, and now that it is, there's not really any point in human communication anymore. So that's a bit of a lost cause. Welcome back, Bionic Me. Solvable Iowa, welcome back. All Windows has to do is nothing, and yet they fail. I know. Like, it's that simple. The outfit looks incredibly funny in this context.
Hush, little Calva. I'll soon birth thee anew, a sweeting, fresh and pure.
Always kind of a creepy moment. I think it's fun. Give people the ambiance of seeing that. Got to kill 3 of the golden channeling enemy to knock her out of the air. While a lot of stuff hits you from different parts of the room. I maybe shouldn't have brought this weapon because it turns out I'm like comically hilariously awful at hitting on target with it. So that wasn't a great choice, but you know, first try, right? It's fine. You just have to interrupt them. Ooh, I didn't know that, actually. Then once it's 3, you can do some damage for a bit. Hee-haw. I ran out of mana. Okay. It's fine. Yeah. Okay. Actually didn't know you can just interrupt them every time I've been playing a build where it made sense for me to just kill them. And that's the fastest phase 1 I've ever had. This Dragonclaw is gonna take us far. Hee-haw. Good timing.
My beloved, have no fear. I will hold thee. Patience. Ye will be countless born, forever and ever.
I just assumed people wanted me to leave these parts in, so I hope it's not overly boring. I thought some people might want the cinematic parts of the experience. I'm sorry, Ronnie.
Mother's rich slumber shall not be disturbed by thee. Foul trespasser. Send word far and wide. Of the last queen of Caria, Rennala of the full moon. And the majesty of the night she conjureth.
Yeah, exactly, asymptomatic. My thought was that I think a lot of people are playing this effectively vicariously through the stream, so you therefore probably want the cutscene. Oh, we're dead? First try? If I can regroup, first try? She's doing the moon. I think this is our opening to summon. Okay. Okay, just really bad. Jellyfish. To attempt to give me some breathing room while I try to heal. If we can get an opening, I think we basically just win. It should be fine. She killed the jellyfish in 1 hit. Classic. She has terrible, terrible poise, so one of the ways to deal with this fight is just to stay on her. Hee-haw. But this isn't looking great. Okay. Yep. I was sort of ready for it, but I was hoping to get both of them with a breath. We'll probably die now. I'll go for it. Okay. Oh, maybe. Okay. No mana. No heals. She's got kind of low health, but that wasn't enough to trigger rot status. Okay. Yeah. That was a pretty terrible first attempt, so we got pretty far. It's going to be easy with this build. It'll be fine. I'm pretty sure this boss resists rot as well. Yep. In fact, I think this status is... I'm pretty sure this boss's programmed in weakness is physical, just physical damage. Do we have anything that's like upgraded more? Like, or is not as well? It's not that this is a bad weapon, it's a great weapon, but that I don't suck as much at using for this fight. Or I could maybe upgrade as a little treat. I could upgrade a weapon. No, I don't think so. That was about the right spread of flat. What's in my physic in this playthrough? Let's look at that. It is this. Okay. This is quite bad for this fight. So I think I'll take that out. And none of the rest of these are going to be good, so actually let's keep it. Okay. And let's pop a rune arc. I'm happy doing these, even though it's not that sustainable for the build in the long run, because making a build like this where you're dividing your stats so much, especially early on anyway, it's at its weakest at the very beginning of the game. So I mean, that literally gained us close to actually 40 levels worth of stats, which is a lot now, but later in the game is going to do very little for this build. Another way to look at it is the rune arcs won't actually be that good early on. I mean, later on. Because this build doesn't need that many of the other things that rune arcs provide as badly as some similar builds, but it does need the early game stat spread pretty badly. / the aggressive early game breakpoints make it so. Because a lot of stats give you a lot of the benefit in the first 10 to 25 points, getting +5 to every stat, which is what that does with Godric's rune, is huge for a build early on, for almost every build early on, but then isn't that good later, which I suppose is why they give it to you early, though it does make the rune arcs are really a lost opportunity in my opinion. They're not very interesting for buildcraft, in my opinion. They are mostly just, you pick the one that does something for your build, and then Godric's is really busted early game, and that's it. Like, there's no more complexity than that, I don't feel. Okay, we're going to go in. We're going to do Dragonclaw a lot. We're going to win. We're going to respec. We're going to go get some more spells so we don't have to spam Dragonclaw all the time. That's the plan. Let's do this. I'm going to be ready to dodge and summon. Ow. Okay. I am, if you've played this game, I'm also like the all-time worst at dodging some of these attacks. Like the books, every single book hits me. Like, count, go ahead. Welcome back, Feather the Crow, good timing. Hee-haw. This is also great collateral damage on the, her followers, her minions. Ow. Two. Do I see a third? Do I see a third? Yes. You. Step right up. Now, this is like the peak damage for that attack. You know, you're not going to get more damage than the seal basically designed for that attack to be powerful, but it's still pretty awe-inspiring to see how much damage you can do. Oh, that's bad. Okay. I really need to conserve mana, so I cannot blue flask here, because I think if I do, I'm gonna not have the mana to keep everything going. I really need to use my whole mana bar every time and not flask until I can get the whole benefit. Ah, very bad, very bad. That was basically free damage for her. That was really bad. Might have thrown the fight right there. Whew, nice. Sort of roll catch? No. My health is just really bad. Like, I'm taking so much damage. We could optimize armor against her a little bit. But I often don't like to win this way when I know it's like, if we just keep trying, if I bash my head against it, we'll win. The truth is, this build is just a bit under-leveled. And I have very lopsided power. Like, I do a ton of damage, but the build hasn't really caught up with managing that. Which I don't find to be the more fun way to play. So let's do a little bit more peripheral content. Let's do some stuff in the game as a whole first. I think would be more fun than just repeatedly doing this. We'll probably still win today, but just regrouping a little bit. And like, I don't even have upgraded weapons. Like, there's a lot of this stuff where I'm just slightly poor at the moment, and if I just got my stuff together, it would be better. So let's slightly regroup. And I lost barely any runes. I made sure I had like 200 on me before. Yeah, let's get some runes and do some stuff. We can get some items from the nearby area. Let's look at the guidebook. Flame Cleanse Me is something I always like to pick up, which is on a monk corpse just southeast of the Church of Vows. Let's go get that. And a lot of this will be like we just get money. I don't like almost all of these weapons, so I'm going to... That's right, I'm the rare Uchigatana disliker. I actually love curved swords, even though they're very maligned by the community. I think they're delightful, and that the way a move hits is way more important than how much damage it does, and that this game is mostly well balanced enough that I don't think that most weapons that like don't do very good damage are so bad that the way they hit is not more important. But that's just what I prefer. Some people are gonna say nope, and that's fine. Like that, it's not. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying that's how it feels to me. Welcome back. I saw earlier there was a lot of Windows hate from the community, which rightly so, you know. Love that. Oh, I love the swiggity swoogity. Shut up. Hey. Turn that off. Oh. Walked into that. So yeah, I'm definitely with you. But I am interested to hear Asymptomatic. You said, Captain may be interested to know that I modded my Windows 11 experience, despite my demonstrated distaste of modding elsewhere. Some things like vertical taskbars do not come standard anymore, and that bothers me more than it maybe ought to. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's bad for that to bother you. I feel like it is the crux of the issue, is that there's a lot of these things where there is some sort of broken and convoluted corporate reasoning why they've decided to remove things that people like, and most of the job of an operating system like this is to do nothing. And they can't, for various broken capitalism related reasons, they've decided they just cannot be. So I don't think I would expect that to be the one place you would break that streak, Asymptomatic. You know, you could argue that it's one of the places where modding has the biggest benefit as well. You can potentially add stuff to your Windows, and that benefits you much more universally. Whereas modding a game, you know, one of the arguments, not really against modding, but like to err on the side of not focusing on modding games, is that you could just play a game that is good without you needing to mod it, which there are many of. And I don't think that captures all the nuance of modding. Like there's some, I don't know, games that are very fun and you can add a lot of fun to them by modding them, of course, right? We've talked about this a lot on the stream before, but at the same time, it is a case where just playing another game that doesn't require modding for Windows 11 is not the same. You can do that, but it's not the same type of option as it would be for like a video game, right? So I absolutely hear you. I'm not exactly surprised to hear that. Flame Cleanse Me, fantastic. Flame Cleanse Me is super good for convenience. This is a spell that removes poison and scarlet rot. There's a few different spells, usually incantations, that remove like ailments, a combination of ailments. The reason I like this one is it removes specifically the 2 damage over time ailments in the game. It doesn't remove things like blood loss, which is very dangerous. It's good to remove blood loss, but it removes the 2 things that are damage over time effects. I find that to be a big convenience, so I'm happy we have it now. Great. Got that in the bank. Maybe just using a strong weapon for this stage of the game would be satisfying right now. I'm thinking of picking a Bloodhound's Fang. That's on the list coming up soon. And it would give us some runes too, which right now is sort of part of the problem. So let's do that. Let's just do it, and then I might not use the weapon for that long, but it's fine. Who doesn't want to pick up Bloodhound's Fang early on? The entire Elden Ring community collectively just said nothing. Everyone did. Well, there was a time where everybody was. Asymptomatic, you said, nobody in my department takes me seriously. I have a system taskbar on right for my personal laptop, taskbar on left for my work laptop. That way, if I have a nested remote session, I know which taskbar belongs to which device. No one can put their taskbar anywhere but the bottom now, so I can be free from misclicking. I mean, that makes sense to me, though. Like, that's not weird. You know, not to overly dump on your fellow employees, Asymptomatic, but I'm sure you've been familiar with the fact that a lot of people just malign literally anything that is not the thing everyone does. And for no reason. It's just, if it isn't the thing that other people are doing, regardless of the benefits or drawbacks, they think it's bad. And the reason is they don't actually think it's bad, of course. That makes no sense. They don't want to feel like they should do it. And the truth is, they probably should. Many of these things, it's like there's kind of just a starter pack of useful things in life that basically everyone should just do. And if life could just come standard with those, that would be grand. Alas, we don't live in such a world. Whoa, there it is. Big chunk. I'm gonna go for Dragon Ice now. Nah, bad. We got some damage, actually. That was still not terrible, but... yeah, we really gotta get a, after this, I gotta set up a weapon with Endure again. I haven't been using that as much as it would have been benefiting us. But I'm used to dodging this guy, so... Super armor from the second Dragonclaw cheeses again. Just straight up a good ability, which is fine, but, like... Asymptomatic, you said, I use my personal laptop to remote into my work laptop to remote into someone else's laptop on a fairly regular basis. Oh, to be fair then to your colleagues, part of the reason they're chiding you is because it's strange right in front of them. Like, they're like, okay, but this is weird and I have to see it all the time, so it, like, matters, sort of, not really. I kind of understand that a little bit more, right? That makes a little more sense. Bloodhound's Fang, fantastic. We have a strong weapon for skirmishing. Skirmishing. Now that I can't equip because it takes more strength than I have, and I use the last rune arc we have. Do we have enough money to get another rune arc? No. Okay, that's fine. We will by the end of doing this stuff. I'm going to get the Flame of Frenzy. This is a cone-shaped rapid-fire AoE spell that does fire damage. Now, technically, it does Madness build-up, but we're going to talk about that when we get it. That doesn't really matter. Technically, it does a status, but it doesn't really matter. People who play Elden Ring, you know already. We'll get into it. Kalu Baptismal Church on a Corpse. Which is where? Here? Or I feel like it's the church in this village, isn't it? If my memory serves. Let's try running in to what I think is the floor plan of that church and see if it's there. I'm gonna guess it's there. Yeah, this looks familiar. I think so. And I think it's just on the ground. That's a sacred tear. Juke the large rat. And there it is. Beautiful. Okay, ow. Yep, that was it. And we need the money, so I guess I should also kill the rat. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. Rats don't like fire, right? I don't know. How did that miss all those rats? All those rats low profile that AoE. Did you see that? Damn it. It's okay. Get out of here. Okay. Great. It looks like this, sort of. It's like that. I'll equip it in a sec. That's what it does. And I'm sure somewhere in here somebody's going to propose doing the Frenzied Flame ending in this playthrough, which I kind of agree with. I think that is not a bad idea. It would also be a way to include the Madness and Frenzied Flame theme stuff, which gets kind of left out of status playthroughs, and we need to talk about that sidebar now. Yes, statuses are even more weird than what we've talked about so far. They're just so finicky. I'm not going to fix that not fitting on the screen. That's perfect, just the way it is. As you can see, here we have, let's yoink over here. The Flame of Frenzy. Emit bursts of yellow flame of frenzy from eyes. Ah yes, yellow flame, my favorite kind. Incantation originating from the maddening 3 fingers. You've heard of 2 fingers, now try 3 fingers. Causes the yellow flame of frenzy. Easy for me to, I got frenzy flame. To burst forth from the caster's eyes. Charging increases the range. The flame of frenzy, blah blah blah. I can't say that. The flame of frenzy deals damage and causes buildup of madness. The incantation also causes buildup of madness in the caster and is only effective against tarnished. Did you blink and miss it? They said a bunch of stuff about the status, and then the Flame of Frenzy does blah, 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 all this stuff, and it's only effective against tarnished. Anyway, so have fun. Right. Madness just doesn't affect NPCs. This is a status. But it just isn't a status except against other players. And, like, there are tarnished NPCs technically in the world, but, like, extremely few of them. And I actually don't even know if this affects those characters. So, yeah, it doesn't really do any status, actually, though, basically. It builds madness in you, which will do damage and stun you if it builds up all the way. And that is a mechanic that limits your ability to spam this, which you probably wouldn't have done anyway, because this is what casting this spell looks like. Just without charging it, which is faster. But as you can see, those 2 casts got me a lot of the way toward madness. Let's trigger it. Yeah. Like that. So you're stunned and you take some damage. Not a huge amount of damage, but you do get stunned, which is... you're basically dead in this game, right? So that's what it does. Still a useful cone-shaped fire AoE, and it's not realistic to try to do a playthrough of this game where we never ever use any spell that does not do status output. There just aren't enough spells that I think that would be interesting. You could do that, but I just don't think it would be very interesting. So I will be using some, and we have been using some, well, the Dragonclaw, that do not do status. But yeah, this is a nice role filler. You know, it's an AoE that will take less time to get started than the Dragon Breath ones, which, as you've seen, have been kind of slow to start up here. So that matters a lot. And before I do anything else, I'm going to put Ash of War Endure on my scimitar, whatever weapon I'm actively using, because we really, really need that ability to just cast something and not stagger. Has been problematic. Getting inflicted with madness eats your FP bar also. Oh, really? Interesting. Let's see. Ooh, yeah, you lose FP. Wow. Oh, that's really bad. So in PvP, it's really good. That's anyway. Holy shit, that's really broken in PvP. I bet it has a reduced effect by some amount in PvP. I bet was the wrong word. I hope it has. Let's say nervous laughter in PvP. Yeah, right. And so just to say that there will be a few other statuses like this, where like death status. If you've played Elden Ring, you might be familiar with death. I can't believe I missed that. Death status, which exists, but like not really. And we will be using some abilities that will inflict it, probably. But we're not going to fuss about that too much. Being so strict that you literally only use statuses or like bend over backwards to use statuses when they come up. Would change it from an interesting build into more of a challenge run, which just isn't what I like to do. That's not bad. Really more to the point, I would say, it's probably just been done. Like, you can find people doing that. I want to have more of like a, what is the fun value of doing a build like this if you just play normally? Like, what if you just want it? Some players, not knowing anything about the game, will just want to do a status spellcasting playthrough. What experience are they having? I think to me that is closer to what I'm interested about this topic, rather than like, I don't know, something like, can you complete the game with all status spellcasting? Like, you can, but who cares? Like, I don't know. No offense, that's fine. It's fine if you're interested in that. I just don't like. Yes, you can. It would take a lot of effort, and that doesn't interest me. Flame of Frenzy is a good spell for other reasons too. Salvo Iowa, you brought up, it has excellent stagger damage for some reason. That is as if you hit an enemy with like a heavy weapon. For some reason, this spell has quite good stagger damage. So it's very effective for like knocking enemies down. I expect that will work on this guy, or at least somewhat. Whoops. Yep. So the limit on casting is bad, certainly. It's not amazing, I personally don't think. But it is a nice spell to have around. And when your target is big, it also has a lot of hits. You will end up doing... It does good damage when the target is large enough to get hit by like the full cone, as it were. I think the other thing about an all spellcasting, all status spellcasting playthrough, like you literally can only cast things that do status. Feather, you said that would be, it could be interesting to watch, but I'd take a specific person to make it interesting, or a specific type of person. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I feel, Feather, is that it would require specifically like a lot of editing. You'd want to remove all of the tedium parts. That's why these things are so popular as compilation videos on the internet, because you remove a lot of the part that politely I think probably wasn't that fun for most of the players that do these kinds of things for most of the time through, but it could be all right to do as a job, like if you consistently make money doing it. I just want to point out that a lot of the reason those videos are popular is because a lot of people aren't willing to spend their energy doing them, not necessarily because like it's so hard, as much as it just takes so much of your time that you will get a relatively exclusive shot at being like, most people just didn't spend time doing this. And I don't like that kind of thing as much. I really like doing things when we make videos or do streams together that you could do and you simply would like to see if you might enjoy doing it, or you could do but you just don't want to and you'd like to watch, and we can lean more into a way of discussing these subjects rather than like you just wouldn't have wanted to. Like, even I mostly wouldn't have wanted to have done this, which is how I kind of feel. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure some people have a good time with that. I just, I don't envy the position of being a YouTuber like that. I think a lot of people do from the outside. They think, oh yeah, you could just play video games all day and do challenge runs. Is that fun on the ground for people that do it like week by week, month by month, year by year, and they have to keep doing it or otherwise they'll lose that audience they've built up, which is interested in a very specific kind of thing? It doesn't sound that fun to me. I don't know. Great. We're coming along. Can we get Church of Inhibition? South of Church of Inhibition in Liurnia. Close to Frenzied Flame Village. In Liurnia? South of Church of Inhibition, which doesn't mean it is south. Is this that? Close to Frenzied Flame Village. Yeah, there's one of those around here. It's probably here. Navigating this area is not my favorite. So look forward to that, I guess. I think the most straightforward thing to do is to get this waypoint, go here, up here, village, go up here, and then we can get to the church. The topography here is like weird, so we'll hope for the best. Anyway, this is also going to be a Frenzied Flame incantation, but again, I'm not getting these because they like are status incantations. Exactly. You could say that's part of the theme. I'm not trying to be over committed to that. This is just the useful, good spell, but it does inflict madness. You could say it's thematic, which I care about a little bit. I was gonna say, it also kind of depends on your definition of challenge run. Like, I just think of the YouTube culture thing, which I feel like is not what we're doing. You know, I've just been calling it a status incantation playthrough to try to downplay that element, because a thing that is sort of broken about me as a creator is that I would rather lose views than have people who don't actually want to see the video have it obsessively plugged at them, which isn't really very good if you want to do this for a living, but that is how I honestly feel. Not entirely with my will, you know, somewhat against my will, I feel that way, but that is how I feel. Does the arcane scale the madness on yourself? So, well, I've been thinking about that, and I think that it does. I feel like the amount of madness that I've used the Flame of Frenzy, that AoE we just got, a lot of times in my time playing this game. I played it a lot when I was in my first playthrough. I splashed Faith in that playthrough, and I used that spell a pretty good amount. And I do not remember it building up madness that fast. I feel like I just made it build up madness to like test it. I do not remember it giving you madness that quickly, or like anywhere near that quickly is basically what I'm getting at. So I don't think so. No. I do think it builds it up. I do not think that's the default build up. Shall we try? Like take off the Dragon Communion Seal and see like, are these spells mostly way worse because I'm doing a status playthrough? That would be interesting. I want to know that. That's not hard to test either. Unless I don't have another seal, but we can just go buy one. I do not have another seal right now. I'll go buy one. Let's do that. Just put that back up there. We have some money now, right? Yep. Probably enough to get the normal... You know what would be efficient would be to get the one from Garank. That's the thing you can get for free, right? Anyway, whatever. The more you increase your knowledge of the arcane, the more susceptible you become to madness. It just makes sense. That does make sense. Yeah, I agree. How realistic. We've spent like almost 0 time here this playthrough, which I think is kind of funny. Yeah, you can just buy a seal out of the gate if you had wanted to do spellcasting but didn't like find or start with a seal. You can just buy one. But for most purposes, it's not that good. Again, the interesting thing is this game is well balanced enough that the finger seal has good numbers if you're in the middle of a lot of stat spreads. Like if you're at stats where most of the other seals are not very good, the finger seal is relatively good. Which I think is kind of interesting. It's sort of nice that they did that, I think. I think it's good how you can see that this game has some elements of its balance where you don't need to know about the like underlying stuff behind the scenes of the math. If you just do things that you would think would make sense, there's a few enough and niche enough options in the game that if you think you want to do arcane status spellcasting and you get the seal that scales with that, that is indeed the best, well, it's the only one that works, as we've talked about in this playthrough, but whatever, seal for doing that kind of thing, right? If you want to do Dragon Communion incantations, a lot of the time this is the best seal for them, and it's the one that says it's the best seal for them. Okay, what about the one that's neutral? It doesn't say it's for anything. Is that the best one when you don't fall into any clear archetype? And mathematically, quite satisfyingly, the answer is yes, some of the time. If you have like wishy-washy faith stats, there are times where this will be a like really good choice. Maybe not the best, I don't know or care. But I remember looking up that it has pretty good stats if you look up its stat spread with like, again, wishy-washy builds. So we just saw that gives you about half a bar with the Dragon Communion seal. Now I'm going to do a fully charged one once I lose all my madness and see if you get as much. If it does give you less, that's bad, because that means that building arcane makes madness spells worse when we use them, because it builds up madness more on me. Looks like no to me, or at least it's not by a significant amount. My Dragon Communion seal is not that upgraded, so it might scale with incant scaling, like just the scaling on the seal overall, but not with arcane, which would be a very Elden Ring thing for it to happen, for a way for it to work. But yeah, I don't think so, or not by an amount that we need to worry about right now. When we get leveled up more, we can test this again and see if it's like disastrous to use Frenzied Flame spells with the arcane seal. But it's fine for now. I don't remember the build-up being that intense. Although for my first couple dozen hours playing Elden Ring the first time, I actually didn't know you could charge these spells, so like at all. And so yes, I didn't remember the madness build-up being that high, but I also didn't do that with those spells. That tower has a madness AoE. We're not going to do madness at all. Proceeds to have like 15 minutes about only madness. Yeah, you see it's building up, it's building up. There she goes. There she blows. You need to line of sight it, but I'm bad and forgot. This time I'll do it better. And put my shield bubble on. So what you could do is you're line of sighting that tower up there. See it? And I'm behind that rock, so it's not happening to me right now. So you could like wait and then go. So I'm gonna go for that, and then this wall will protect you while you're doing the content. Yeah, there we go. And now we're basically out of range, so it's fine. Cookbook. These things are worth like 100 runes each, so I kind of want them right now. Rune Arc. Okay. Shabubus. Whoa. Dodge all these guys. And then Bionic Me, we can test one more thing since it comes naturally anyway. It says it only affects Tarnished. Now that is not literally just player characters. It should also be the NPCs that count as fellow Tarnished. Let's see if that works. I might die trying to see if that works, but it's fine. We're here for science. Fun. Come forth. Okay. Yeah. This guy also uses madness, so yeah. That's the spell we want. I like that they have them use it. That's fun. Okay. Okay. All right. Yep. Okay. Yep. Oh no. Oh dear. Yeah. No. I'm just going to lose if I'll try. Okay. Should have seen that coming. No, as you can see, there's no way I'm going to come even close to winning if I try to do that. I can't be precious about it like that. In fact, I'll probably just lose anyway, but we can at least try to win, right? Hee-haw. Hee-haw. Just two guys trying to drive each other into madness for science. A tale as old as time. I know it's beautiful, isn't it? A tale of two gentlemen fighting with madness spells in the night. Bad madness spells. Ow. Good madness spells. Excuse me. Okay. 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 That AoE is insane. I've not seen the AoE be that big before. I feel like I've dodged this guy easily before. Okay. I'm getting a read on him. Okay. How? What? All right. The super armor is crazy. Do I get a stake or do I have to run all the way back? Oh, there's a nearby site of grace I'll get. Let's put this topic away. People know what's going on here. Yeah, another thing we could do if you wanted to use madness spells with more impunity is equipping gear with high resistance to madness. We have very little armor right now, so I kind of doubt there's a lot of room to do that at the moment, but we can take a look, certainly. And right, there's also a stat that increases resistance to madness, and I suppose it's mind in this case, is it? So there are things you can do. Yeah, this isn't like a cheesy or a difficult thing. If you get stuck on this when you're playing yourself, there's stuff you can do to deal with this. But this time, let's learn our lesson and... Oh, just barely. Go get a site of grace nearby. I didn't realize it was going to be so far until one. Could have sworn there was one around here. Yeah. Why? Looting, what are you doing to me? Torrent, please. Normally, such a big fan. Please. Just loot the item. Torrent, pick up the thing. Come on. Oh my god. Okay. Yeah. This is definitely, for me, the one part of the game that can drag sometimes, where, like, getting where you're going, or, like, going back to your stuff. I understand the purpose and the design of having you lose your runes, or souls, or whatever it is in these various games. But I do personally think that a lot of developers, and including From Software, have gone a little far in the, like, you're spending a lot of your time backtracking in practice. I think the thing that makes it bad with Elden Ring is that this world design is very... it's not straight, is the point I'm trying to make. Everything is not in a line. It's always very aggressively not in a line. And this can become ridiculous at times. Especially this area. This was the first area where I first encountered it anyway, where it first bothered me. It is ridiculously difficult to get anywhere by trying to, like, think about how you would get there. There's some, like, incredibly esoteric... Hey, look at that. Okay? Some incredibly esoteric way. Like, I'm never, ever going to get there now. I have absolutely no idea. You know, we just have to go back. I'll never find the Site of Grace either. Like, that's not going to happen. I could look them up, but I've been trying to de-emphasize that with this playthrough. It's just a frustratingly designed world in that way. There's sort of almost always not a straight line toward where you want to go. Just a little too often. And because this is already a game where you'll lose your runes when you die, that does add up a lot. Again, I personally feel like I'm not totally sure. Another good example, I don't know if they did this in Silksong, but in Hollow Knight, the first Hollow Knight, backtracking for your runes, or your souls, or your geo in Hollow Knight, is a little bit at odds with the game's design of, like, you could explore in different paths. You won't, because all of your money is down the path you went down, but you, in theory, could abandon all the things the game rewards you for, and you would be able to, like, maybe explore in different ways, you know? I feel that these games have a bit... Oh, it's literally right here. Classic. Gonna get Mattis again, but it's fine. was right there, which is classic. Again, I'm not saying they're hard to find. I'm just saying the terrain is such that you probably won't find them, but yeah, the point I was trying to make before was just that the where did I... Oh, it is still up there. Okay. It's just that the design of needing to go back to get your stuff, like one of the points of that design is that you feel a sort of tension. When you die, you lose a resource that you want. Your runes or souls or geo or whatever. And this is partly, among other things, intended to create tension and to encourage you not to give up as easily, I think is also a pretty obvious intended reason. It won't do to criticize this piece of design that I personally greatly dislike by saying that it's just pointless and why do they put that in the game. That's a stupid thing to say. It's pretty obvious some reasons why they put it in the game. You have to challenge those reasons and say, well, you don't have to, you could just not play that game. But if you want to discuss this and have it be meaningful, you would have to challenge that reasoning. You'd have to say, I have a reason why, I can think of reasons why they put it in the game, but I don't think that that benefit is worth, and then insert negative thing, you know. I hope this isn't babying anybody in the audience when I talk about it this way. I do personally think that people are mostly currently very, very bad at discussing things. Most discussions boil down to somebody says one thing, somebody says another thing that ignores the thing the first person said. And then the first person says, I disagree with the thing the second person said, without discussing it or talking about it at all. That's not really a disagreement. I mean, it might be, but we don't know because no person explained what they meant by that, or like no person acknowledged or refuted why the other person thought what they thought. I think we're guilty of this on this stream a lot as well. It's something I've been trying to do better, though it's hard, and you don't have to be like good at debating to watch this stream. It's fine. But it's something I care about and want to do better at. Okay. So it's the madness buildup really that is the issue. Yeah, I'm just dead if he gets moved on. Right, okay, yes. Yeah, let's look at gear to prevent madness buildup. I mean, the real problem is that I have no weapons that have meaningful reach that I have the stats for. So at this early stage of the game, relying this heavily on spellcasting, I just wouldn't normally do that. Though you could say that's also a flaw with the game. Like, why is that such a thing if it's such a bad idea to do it? But let's do that. And anyway, the point is, I think this is a case where it's worth having a discussion about that. I think very few humans, period, let alone game developers, have sat down and thought, okay, what are like the actual merits of doing the you drop your stuff when you die? And does our game actually want that benefit? Like, does that fit the game's design? So to have that conversation, we can't assume that we know every reason for it, but we have to at least think about what are some of the reasons they put that in. Another pitfall I wanted to point out before we continue is that a lot of people at around this juncture in the conversation will say something like, oh, well, the developers have an interview where they say why they put it in the game. Okay, that's relevant, but that doesn't just mean those are the reasons, nor does that really matter. It matters what good reasons are, regardless of whether the developers would provide them or not. I feel like this, again, I don't want to make anyone feel like I'm babying them by describing it in this, to me it feels basic way. I just legitimately believe that most existing discussions in humankind are that bad, that you kind of need to go back to this basic level and say, are you actually like trying to discuss? Is the goal discussion? All right, let me focus and kill this guy because this is getting silly. That super armor is totally crazy. Pretty much dead. Okay, I survived. Hey. He's got a flask too. Classic. Tarnished. Douche. Douche. The hitbox of that is so huge. We lead in with another one as that spell ends. And we run out of mana at the last second. Classic. Yeehaw. Okay. That's done. Give me the spell. Looking forward to fighting you in like 20 hours, Vike. He appears later in the snowfields, mountaintop of the giants. There. Well done. Just to say that I do think the combat, like one way in which something that's kind of bothered me recently on the stream has been the discussions that we had in previous parts of this series about like, is Elden Ring more or less than the sum of its parts? I don't mean to insult anyone, including myself, who partook in these discussions by saying this, but the way those have been going is kind of silly. It obviously is more than the sum of its parts and less than the sum of its parts. Which things do people think are more and less of the sum of their parts? Having a game where you fight bosses like the bosses in Dark Souls, but the game is an open world, so you can freely explore and level up in different ways, is in some ways more than the sum of its parts, in that if you get stuck on a boss or frustrated, or you feel like you're under-leveled or under-tuned for that content, you can just go do something else, and there's something productive to do elsewhere. There's a feeling of going on an adventure, and your specific unique adventure you went on, giving you specific benefits. Maybe obviously. It is more than the sum of its parts. It is. There's no room to discuss that somehow doesn't happen in the game. It does. It also obviously isn't more than the sum of its parts in other ways. There are ways that, for example, the mechanic where you die and you lose your runes is arguably a little worse in an open world game, because instead of going somewhere else, that thing that was just the thing that was more than the sum of its parts, you often have a very large incentive to not explore, completely deleting the open world so you can go get your runes back. There's a number of things you can do to prevent this. The rune insurance that we will be unlocking probably in like 1 or 2 play sessions from now on the stream. We'll go get rune insurance set up probably pretty soon. Maybe probably not today, but maybe, no, not today. But maybe tomorrow, the next stream day anyway, next week. Wow, that was the most coherent scheduling I've ever said. One of the following weeks at this time. You know the schedule, most of the regulars. People watching on YouTube are probably like, huh? Sorry. The next time we play the damn game, you get it. But there are lots of parts that kind of damage having to go back for your runes, and one of them is the open world's design. So it is absolutely more than the sum of its parts and less than the sum of its parts in some ways. And there might be some people that feel like, well, it's ultimately less than the sum of its parts, because even though it obviously is more than the sum of its parts in some ways, the open world allows you to adapt to the bosses you're having trouble with in a way you couldn't if it wasn't an open world. Some people might argue that benefit is undone by the fact that there are these drawbacks to the open world. Okay, I just feel like I would nitpick the term undone there. Like, the benefit still exists. It might just be that it is tarnished, sorry, couldn't resist, by the things you think are drawbacks. Mr. Fruit, by the way, good timing. For no reason at all, we happen to be talking about that. I just feel like I am the one who is supposed to be doing this. You know, you don't have to debate in a poised manner, but that is sort of part of the value add of these streams, is that I will provide some coherent discussion and mediate in some way and cause the discussion to be worthwhile, rather than just leaving it to be like, I think this, and then another person says, I think that, and both people don't try to meet in the middle, and then we say, wow, it's a mystery. What would be a good thing to think about this discussion? And it's like, not really. Like, we could just try to understand each other's perspectives, and you all don't have to do that, but I will. I mean, I do it in my spare time after the stream. And I think that a lot of the points that come up on these streams are really good, but I just, in the moment, I don't do a good job of capturing them or like breaking them down or building them up, whatever you want to say. And I'm going to try to do better at that. That's something I feel like I don't really need to get better at. I just need to get better at actually doing. I mean, of course, getting better at it would be nice too. And that the Elden Ring is really a flashpoint for this, where like putting this in an open world, doing Dark Souls but open world, has a lot of little consequences all over the place that I feel like it are really interesting, but also a very mixed bag, quite decisively a mixed bag. Oh, we didn't actually get the spell yet. We got something else from Vike. The War Spear, right? Maybe we should get revenge and use this. kind of into that. How much more stats do we need to... Do I have 11 strength? Okay, so... Not that soon. Well, with a rune arc, I could do it right now. That's actually not that far away. Maybe I will use this soon. Okay. This is a fine weapon. Again, the madness buildup is not relevant most of the time, but the damage is good. And that attack has mad super armor. Anyway, as we continue to talk about this extremely mixed bag of a game experience, at least in my opinion from a design perspective, we will be coming up to this point a lot of times where it doesn't really make sense to say, like, I didn't like this game, so it is badly designed. Like, well, there's a lot to unpack there. You don't have to, but in a game design discussion, one would have to, and that's what we're going to have. Again, I think the worst offender is that many of you actually have ended up getting a kind of accidentally bad shake with this, where Mr. Fruit, for example, you yourself, I already know from other conversations with you, believe everything I'm saying, but the conversations as I present them on the stream often make it sound like you all are talking past each other, when in some cases I actually know you're not. So especially having an intimate audience like this, where like these streams when they're live don't have a big audience, I want you to get credit for the better version of your own opinion that you have. And also to make it clear when people don't feel that way. It's okay not to feel that way, but it's important, to highlight that somehow. So we'll get into that more. Let me just get a frenzy burst before I get too distracted. It says it's a scarab south of the Church of Inhibition, close to... Oh, I remember this. It's in kind of an odd spot. It's like this way-ish. It's along the other side on a wall, if I remember correctly. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, this area's navigation drives me absolutely up a wall. Ted Kadensky, good timing. This is one of my least favorite parts of the open world design in all of Elden Ring, but for this playthrough, there's a lot of relevant spells here. So we've ended up in a position where I'm inevitably going to spend a decent amount of time here, mountain goating around, and I'm not super duper looking forward to every moment of that. So I'm happy that we're doing this on a stream. This is one of those things where I think that is most of this playthrough for me. Like, a lot of the entertainment value on my end is coming from, getting to do it with all of you here. Like, I'm not sure I would want to do this playthrough again and have stuff like this happen if we weren't doing it on the stream together. But it's fun to break down, like, status incantations are just so weird and finicky, and so it's sort of fun to chew into the nonsense burger that is status casting in this game. Together. I'm not sure that actually was the right spot, but I fell off and lost my runes, so just as we were talking about a few minutes ago, it now behooves me to go back and get them. I think it might have been on the way up instead, and I just passed the scarab. It's like in the... Or is it literally just right here? That would be funny. I think it is. Pretty sure this is it. Please die? Die before that big rat kills me? No? Thank you. There we go. Hee-haw. And let's get back to that wall and get... There we are. Simple as that. Do I care about what that item is down there? Or did I get it and then die? I got it and then died. Got it. Beautiful. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's equip that because we're at a good point with some new tools. So we discovered, certainly the way I'm using it, the Flame of Frenzy, when charged anyway, inflicts a lot of madness buildup. It doesn't seem affected by the seal, which is good. That would be hilarious, but bad. But I do think it's more practical to be using this more. So that will be more of a staple tool. Frenzy Burst is such a good sniping tool. I'm going to go find some random enemy and show you, because this is probably going to end up being a part of our kit for a while. I really like this spell. I feel like a lot of people do. It's a very, very useful long-range tool. One of the better like long-range poking or sniping tools in the game. Often from way outside enemies' effective range, you can just pow with great bullet speed, good damage to mana ratio when you charge it. Yep. There's not a lot wrong with this spell. It's not very fast. It doesn't matter that much, but it is indeed kind of slow. Besides that, there's not a lot else. It's really good. That it's a great tool. So that will be very helpful to have around. What a nice pickup. I'm trying to think about what else, since we kind of just need runes to a point. I think I bought Blessing's Boon here, but let's just take a look. Rainmaker, welcome back. How you doing? We were just talking a little bit about Elden Ring. In many ways has been interesting to discuss in the stream because it is a game that many people will have very different experiences with, and it is a game of conflicts where I sort of feel a nostalgia for Breath of the Wild, where FromSoft just took Dark Souls and made it open world. There aren't all that many adaptations to turn Dark Souls into open world. It kind of just is directly Dark Souls but open world, with like not that many changes to the formula, for better or not better, as you often say, asymptomatic. And one of the things about that is that there will be lots of elements where making Souls combat open world, or like really open world, is good, but also bad in a lot of ways simultaneously. And a lot of people in the general public do not discuss things this way. They will say it's good or it's bad. What is my take on the subject? This is, of course, kind of a silly way to think, and the way to have a useful opinion about something is to include both takes. But Elden Ring is really full of these things. It really pushes the buttons of that way of discussing. So I was just making the point earlier that a lot of you do a really good job with this. We spend the whole stream cultivating people getting to have discussions like this, and sometimes I feel it falls to me to make sure that we actually follow through with them. I just wanted to focus on that a little more. So, delighting me, a lot of you have very good discussion points about this coming up. Let me spend some time discussing them. What I'm going to do while doing that, so I'll catch up on chat by a lot, is go grab a rune arc and just start doing like basic dungeons. We just need more runes right now. So let me tank up enough that I can use Vike's War Spear, and we'll just go do some stuff in Limgrave and get the money. And I haven't done that a lot in this playthrough, right? Like, one of the consequences of being on the stream while playing is that we're really lasering down all the specific objectives. So, kind of pleasant for someone who's played the game a lot. I'm quite under-leveled for most stuff that we've gotten to, or I am at about parity for the level for most of the things we've gotten to. And I think it's time for that to end. Also, we're catching up, you know, like we're going fast enough that that's not completely true for all these things anymore. Okay. So let's do that, and it's pretty simple to do that. We haven't done Castle Morn. I don't think that's going to be very hard for this setup, so let's go do that. Meme some people with Vikes for a little bit. Let me just adjust Frenzy Burst on the document. We're plowing through things to get today. Absolutely annihilating the list of stuff to get. And yeah, we'll get back to open world subjectivity is my best way to describe the topic. Asymptomatic, you said, up until now, I appreciated the way AI limit handled death. It came from above. The taxation is immediate upon death. No blood stain to get back 100% of the player's losses. Instead, the player has equipable cores that are roughly on a spectrum of souls gained on kill and souls kept on death. Ooh, that's cool. In this game, the player can customize how much the game makes you drop your currency on death. How fascinating. I had not thought that seems like such an obvious thing now that you mention it. That's cool. What a fun idea. Seems like a good breath attack moment. That goes off a little bit. Do one of these again. Oh yeah, I knew this was going to be a good matchup for this weapon. Hell yeah. Yep. I used to really hate fighting these guys, but it's gotten quite entertaining for me. I've come to like them. Their moveset is just so derpy. It's kind of fun. So that's cool. You can kind of customize how much you lose or don't on death. That's a fun idea. Sorry, you continued. The souls gained on kill is high risk, high reward, high rewards, I guess. While the latter is safer. You can not lose as much when you die, but there's no running back to get your stuff. It sounds kind of linear. I haven't played this game yet, but you've mentioned it a lot of times, and it sounded kind of linear. I don't know if that's true. Okay. Spears, am I right? Well, you have... Could have sworn you had a sideswipe attack. No? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. It's the heavy. I actually haven't used great spears that much. Not to be confused with spears. Great spears. They're great. Yeah. But yeah, that's cool. The idea of being able to customize that sounds fun. Oh, and so asymptomatic, you're also saying there's also a bank of sorts. You can kind of like bank away the souls if you don't want to have them on you to lose them. So if you want to go do something and you're worried about losing them, you have the option to kind of put them in a bank instead, which I think is a great idea of a feature. Again, you can kind of set up a thing in Elden Ring that is like rune insurance, and we will do that in the next few episodes, but that existing makes me question even more, why is this like this? You know, why is it really good to allow the player to just lose their stuff? Is that really worth it? Even though there are a lot of design reasons why it's meant to be beneficial. So yeah, that's cool. Earlier, Mr. Fu, you were just saying something I feel like is related to this, you know, what is the point of the open world and the dropping the runes thing and subjectivity about this subject in general, that I wanted to come back to. You said, most people here in this chat is what you mean, know me well enough to recognize the pattern where if someone presents point A and I am even slightly opposed to point A, I'm going to come at the person with opinion A hard with an opposing position, because that's where interesting discussions happen. I think that is correct as a good way to have an interesting discussion. I hope it doesn't offend you when I say I completely disagree. I think almost nobody here has ever thought that when you've done that. That is my prediction. I have thought that when you've done that, sure, but you literally pay me money monthly to have discussion videos on Pantaloon Saloon where I make parlay, where you ask me to do that. So yeah, I definitely know what you mean, and I might be overstating how little other people have, but I don't think other people assume that. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad to do. I have a board on my desk right now that says okay. preface 4 times. Because I personally think that one of the things that I, and perhaps all of us really, I'm not trying to criticize you, could do better at is to preface these things, to say, I think that is an opinion that exists. I think it would be interesting to discuss by providing a conflicting opinion, because I think that almost everybody is still really badly in the habit of, if people say something that disagrees with what they said, they cannot stop themselves from the impulse of thinking that means the person does not like them, more or less. I'm kind of oversimplifying, but I think you know what I mean if you've lived in this society. So I guess this is all I'm trying to say. I mean, Mr. Food, I love that you brought this up. And you're a person who I feel like this is all an easy sell for. But that's a great example of the kind of thing I'm talking about, where I personally feel like the problem is that it's a really reasonable thing to assume. I just feel like I, and maybe you and other people, have severely underestimated, because it would be really nice to be able to not worry about this anymore, how badly humans cannot do that kind of thing. I am not going to say you shouldn't do it. I just think it's worth being aware, if it runs into roadblocks, that probably the explanation is other people just haven't thought about it that way. I personally would say, I think I'm a little lazy. I don't want to have to deal with this. I want to just be in the world of people who like have real discussions, and we're just not. We're not in that world. I mean, we're sort of in that. We're as close as you can get. I think we still do a good job here, but you said, I see what you mean, but I feel like prefacing everything all the time is a waste of time. We need to find a balance. Sure, of course. I mean, I do think it's worth saying that as a starting point, this is a stream where you at least can preface things. Like that's the first step to me, is that in most modern arenas of discussion, we've talked about this in the stream before, I have this thing about like, don't discuss things in a place where you cannot elaborate. Rather than, like, if you go on Twitter or whatever, and you say something you think, you often, due to the character limit, literally can't elaborate. You can put a bunch of things in the replies or do a thread. I did this a lot when I still used Twitter, and I know people are going to say, oh yeah, you totally can. I think people are being unrealistic about how seldom people read those, or like those are things people read. That's part of Twitter's culture. It's not that they don't read them at all, but I think it's unrealistic to suggest that the people who would want to hear or need to hear the thing that you're saying in the replies are actually reading all the way through, instead of the like broad take being the thing most people get. So the first step is that on this stream, you at least can elaborate. You have time to elaborate if you want to. People are ready to listen to an elaboration of your point. I've definitely had people who've tuned into this stream, and it's interesting because Twitch has so little of this, where like some people will get quite uncomfortable if you discuss, and that's okay, but we're definitely not going to not do that. Like, it's too bad, but I guess the stream just isn't for those people. There are people for whom it's quite anxiety inducing for a discussion to occur. This is understandable, but it's too big of a cost to cater to that, to give away the ability to discuss. Like, I'd say you shouldn't stop yourself from discussing just because that will happen. You should just be nice to people who've lived in a culture that isn't that nice about this stuff, and, you know, not be mean to people who feel uncomfortable with that. But it's definitely not, you know, you can't like not discuss because some people will say, please don't discuss. Like, no, that should just be rejected. Right. The people who feel hurt when you disagree usually aren't interested in actual discussions. They just want you to echo their experience, or at least that's my experience. Yeah, I mean, I think the complicating factor, Mr. Food, is that a lot of people, I believe, are at the point where it's an impulse that they feel not hurt necessarily, but like anxious about their point being, them being told there is something bad about the point they have. It's not so much that they don't want to discuss, in my opinion, as that there are plenty of people, I believe, who want to discuss, but just haven't removed the reflex that, like, it says something bad about them if their opinions are incomplete. If you get into actually talking about things with people enough, you quickly realize that nobody's opinions about anything are complete. And so it says absolutely nothing about you if you have an opinion that is incomplete. The only thing that says something about you is how much you discuss your opinions. And the problem is that for most people, that is, they don't discuss their opinions. I just realized I don't have the rune arc active. Or that I do and I died and now I can't use any of my weapons. Classic. Okay. Yeah, so much for that. I'm gonna take the whip. I like the whip. The whip is not good. Statistically, by most numerical measurements, it's a pretty bad weapon, but I really like it. So I don't know, Mr. Voot. I'm just saying that I think it's worth acknowledging that there is a gap in there, where there are a lot of people who do react similarly, but more or less are interested in discussion. And they just are in a very understandable but bad habit of feeling like it's bad to discuss. I agree with you that a lot of people, and it's very tempting, and I have been tempted in the past, by basically just dismissing people who, you know, get hurt by these things. Certainly in my personal life, I do that and might recommend that you do the same. I just don't think there's time in life to deal with people who want things to be simpler than they are. That's like fine that they have to work through that, but it's too much of a loss in terms of time in your life for it to be worth catering to that behavior. But I feel like when talking on the internet, it's doable sometimes to hash this kind of stuff out. So I don't know. Maybe it isn't. And it's your choice to decide that. My point was just that I think the first step that we get on this stream is that you at least could discuss these things if you wanted to. You have the option. We got an archer in the corner, but I'm going to try to just kill this guy quickly first. Noise. Buh. Okay. Wow. Okay. He really went for it there. Uh-huh. This is gonna hit the wall. Oh. Having some targeting issues. Okay. Alright, we're not doing that right now. I still am on the fence about whether this entire playthrough is a good idea, because it is very difficult to fight in a way that won't make you want to die by watching me while having an involved discussion. Anyway, I just personally feel like this does put us in a position where you can elaborate, and so in many cases, I hear you. You don't have to want to elaborate every time. It's not a waste of time, though. I mean, it definitely isn't a waste of time. It is just... You could argue then it's a waste of time to talk in a public forum about these things, but it definitely does clarify in many cases. I feel that most people under-clarify, and even the people that think that they over-clarified, that is still under-prefacing or clarifying. But that's an opinion. I don't know. That's not a facetious opinion where I'm saying I'm trying to be diplomatic, but this is what is true. I'm saying I don't know. This is an effort to do research on the subject. My current position is that probably I, at least, and people that communicate similarly to me, surprisingly, are probably still under communicating and could clarify even more. And I don't know if that's true. You certainly don't have to do it here. I'm just explaining that I certainly will try. Just catching back up on chat a little bit more, though. Earlier, thank you for being patient, by the way, Ted Kitten. You said Elden Ring has so much I haven't explored. I did a Katana Bleed build, but I know how cool the other archetypes are. Archetypes. Big and long game to surmount. Open world games seem like they'd be really subjective to have discussions about unless you've traversed every millimeter. Subjective is fine, but like experiencing different games. Yeah, I mean, this is a good example of the thing I was trying to describe. Like, I think it depends in a way on what you mean by subjective. I definitely get what you mean. Obviously, having an open world like this where, let's take the Dragon Communion Seal, for example. This is found at a dungeon that is so close to the beginning of the game, it's arguably before the beginning of the game. The proper, anyway. But it isn't the end reward for the dungeon, so it is entirely possible that other people will just not... Are you... Really? We're doing this right now? It is entirely possible that many people will play this game, want to do the type of build that we're playing right now, but we'll just never find the thing that we have. You could look it up, but you would need to know to look it up too. In nowhere in the game does it tell you that statuses from incantations don't scale unless you use this seal, because it scales with arcane and that's what plugs that in. Nowhere in the game does it tell you that there is a seal that does that. So some players might just assume the status is scaling and they just can't see it, so they don't know. You would need to know to even look for this existing and then go get it. Yes, definitely. Extending that idea much further, there's lots of parts of this game that many people wouldn't even know existed. In a few streams I was mentioning, we were going to do that thing where you get like rune insurance. And that is a good example of something where I think a lot of people who play this would really like that, or it would really defrustrate some parts of the game for them, but we'll just never find it. And not so much because it's so hard to find, it's not asterisk, but just because they wouldn't know to look. They don't think to look. How it works is sort of weird, so it's not immediately obvious that there would be something like that available. We just cheese these rats because they get practically no runes, but it's a matter of principle at this point. Okay. Surprisingly bad track record with rats today, huh? I've like high profile missed a ton of rats. Anyway, but in another way, I don't think it's that subjective in that, like, for example, the way that the game handles leveling stats, you will budget your stats differently, and it will be more aggressive how you budget your stats, depending on what archetype you play, by a lot, I would say. That is, how precious level ups are and how limited your stat points feel definitely depends a lot on what type of build you're trying to construct and at different times in the game. You know, we were talking about Godric's rune being an overbearing piece of shit as far as game design, in that it's really overpowered. But looking at it another way, it's interesting because it's way better for builds that want a variety of stats, and still really good by the nature of the game. A lot of the stats are useful to everybody, but significantly less powerful for builds that are focused on one stat. For example, if you play a pure strength build and you get Godric's rune, you pretty much will benefit from the endurance, the vigor, and the mind as well, especially early in the game. Whereas if you have a build that's using a variety of stats, you're worse off in the early game, but you also gain more from Godric's rune, which I wouldn't say is a very good exchange, but that is a thing that happens. You really do get close to 40 levels. Yeah, I guess you benefit from the 5 arcane for more drops. That's a little cheesy. I wasn't going to bring that up, but yeah, it's right. It's a gray area, right? But right, I feel like a lot of that is mostly true of linear games as well. Mr. For You said, isn't that true for even linear games? I don't see what's so different in the open world setting. The main thing is, like, that there are these things so hidden off the beaten path that are arguably a rather large part of the game. I mean, it's entirely possible you'd play this game and find 1 or 0 sacred seals in your entire time playing. And so you might not even know where to get the thing that lets you spellcast. Now, there is the one with the twin crones, the twin bell maidens. I don't remember what that vendor is actually called. You know what I'm talking about. In the Round Table Hold. If you look for that, some people might not immediately notice and read every single item when they go to each vendor. So I hope you'll accept that not me, not a player like me, I pretty much obsessively read every new item that's offered to me, but lots of players will play this game and not even know where they would get things to cast spells, incantations anyway. it's pretty unlikely you won't get staves for sorceries. Whereas in a linear game, I think that it is a lot less, much less likely that will happen. And often those games just don't offer such a disparity in ways to play, while also having you traverse different parts of the world. You fight enemies with different abilities. How good is being able to negate, I got Flame Cleanse Me earlier. How good is being able to negate Poison and Scarlet Rot? When I first played through Elden Ring, somehow, I basically just didn't notice the propensity of Poison Swamps. I don't know what was going on. I went here very early in my first playthrough, and I just didn't see this. It's right there. It's literally right there. I just didn't notice. I la-di-da-di-da, I went right by. And then people started making the joke about the Poison Swamps, and I was like, what's going on? There's no propensity of Poison Swamps in Elden Ring. It's not a big deal. What are people on about? I don't know what was happening to me when I first played, but yeah, no, there's a lot of Poison and Scarlet Rot. Hello, hi there. Heard of this before? The gigantic Scarlet Rot Lake in the center of the zone, right next to where you start. But you could play in a way where you don't meaningfully experience that, or in a way where it's all over the place. I would say that is the simple difference with open worlds. Yes, in some ways, that is very subjective. Now, I would personally argue that for, like, let's say Flame Cleanse Me. So in light of that, is Flame Cleanse Me like an objectively good spell, right? And I mean, no, but I think that part is kind of the same as linear games. That's a place where I would sort of agree with you, Mr. Food. It's like whether you think that Frenzy Burst is a good spell. I mean, it's good at what it does well, but there's another way of interpreting that question, which is it useful, like, in context? Like, if you have every spell, and this is the dangerous thing when we talk about build systems, where some things don't really mean anything unless we assume you either have everything or you have nothing else. Like, you have no other way to attack at that range. Then that's not meaningful because Frenzy Burst is obviously very good, right? And if you have everything in the entire game, I mean, there's a lot of options that are really similar side grades, in my opinion. I don't know. Without thinking about it too much, that's what I would say. You really need more mana. That's been a problem a lot. So I don't know. I think there are some differences, but no, it's not so different. I can see where you're coming from with that, Mr. Food. At the same time, I do feel like there is still that permanent thing in is this guy immune to Scarlet Rot? He might be. Oh, no. Oh no, no. Okay, wow, that was the worst string of dodges you've ever seen for me, huh? Whoa. I think he died to poison at the end, which is kind of a BM way for him to go. Nice amount of runes for the relative ease. So I don't know. I do think that the I do think that there is a subjectivity that isn't there in a linear game, in that your experience can be, you can literally completely avoid things that would be a huge part of the game for other people. And your variance of the items you get is larger, but larger enough that I believe it is a qualitative difference at that point. Your items on your account may not even resemble what other people had. Whereas in a linear game, that is much more unlikely. Not impossible, but just much less likely, I think. That's reasonable, fair. But I still see what you mean. It's not, like, super different. Make sure to thank your resident jellyfish. I personally am praising the jelly bejesus after that situation. I do not like the enemies that are here. The big hand. Let's get out a fire spell. And I'll get to the parlor and then we'll break, because it's been easily half the stream. But anyway, this topic is getting slightly entangled, but you get the general thing. We're just making a comment about the way in which discussing these things has little meaning without giving it some perspective. Like, yeah, there definitely is something a little more subjective about the experience of exploring an open world, in that, like, there's just less things you're guaranteed to experience. And some of those things might, like, give you rewards. But also, it is kind of not that different. I can also see that perspective too. Not falling for that this time. Mr. Fruit, you said the example I'm thinking of is Dark Souls 3, and that game is very linear while having every issue you described in Elden Ring. There is exactly the same amount of variance, or an appreciably similar amount of variance, to the amount of variance in items and challenges, and even just dungeons and biomes that you'd experience in Elden Ring. Because if there is, then I would argue that I misunderstood Dark Souls 3's structure when I've watched it over people's shoulders. It sounds much more open world-y than I had at first understood. I'm arguing that there is a qualitative difference in the arguably just quantitative amount of, like, not the same stuff that people will experience. I find it hard to believe. I believe you if you insist. I don't have any way to know. Having watched, like, a ton of Dark Souls 3 over my friend's shoulder, but not having actually played through the entire game myself. But I would be surprised to hear that it is a game where there is this level of variance in what people did and experienced, and this level of variance in what challenges and dungeons and abilities other people got. That surprises me. That might be true. I mean, the Dragon Communion Seal, in a way, was exciting for me to base a playthrough around, because it's an example of a thing that there are a lot of status incantations in the game. Not a huge amount, but, like, there are quite a few of them. There's, like, a good couple dozen, maybe. But the status on them doesn't scale at all. The status incantation archetype does not exist unless you have this one item. And that type of thing, and there's other versions of that, where there's types of spellcasting that are basically not a part of the game, but then a rather large percentage of the game suddenly kind of wakes up if you go to a very obscure location. That feels different to me. But again, I don't know. And again, I mean, so Mr. Fruit, the crux of the issue is it seems like you don't agree that people actually do experience very different content in Elden Ring. So sure, if you believe that people explore the world very thoroughly every time they play, most players explore the world very thoroughly when they play. I believe that is not true. I don't think they do. But I don't know that. Neither of us can prove that. So that's a very good example of the thing we were talking about before, where that affects this discussion a lot. Obviously, if you think that people explore the world thoroughly, open world games don't really exist, because they are linear, but they're just in a weird way. You see what I mean? To me, an open world game largely loses its significance. I would be really interested to hear if people can give me what they feel like are good examples of how open world games are different if you complete everything in them, basically. At that point, to me, it's kind of the same thing. Now, yeah, this is a big question mark. A lot of people in our culture are very completionist focused, and I'm not. But I still don't think a lot of the casual audience playing this game is very thorough when they explore. I also think there's a large number of people who would tell you they explore very thoroughly, but if you look to their game, they are surprisingly not thorough, is what I'm saying. Not to say they don't explore at all, but just there's a lot of hidden stuff. And so it might be that, yes, there's a lot of people that do go off the beaten path a lot. I don't think that's uncommon. But just that I'm arguing that that results in a surprisingly inconsistent amount of content that each player experiences. And that's very arguable, yeah. There is a lot of convergent design and repetition, but I just disagree about the matter of degree. It's good you brought this up. Yes, it hinges on that point. But I would make the broader point that if you think that's true, Mr. Fruit, it sounds to me like Elden Ring really isn't an open world as such. There's no meaningful difference. It basically, there isn't any way that a player could, well, you could make a much more open world. What you're saying is, like maybe Breath of the Wild is open world in a way where you feel like people will now have very different experiences, but just Elden Ring isn't. Is that more like what you're saying? That kind of makes sense. Asymptomatic, you said, a stance worth taking is a stance worth clarifying. Word count is not synonymous with credibility, but it goes a long way. What if my clarifications are not insured against rats? That is what you were saying that at the time when I was getting killed by rats. But no, I think this was a great example of this working well. And well done finding that that is clearly the thing, Mr. Food. That is the point of contention we have. That's an interesting point. Ted Kinsky, you point out that a minimum percent, or like a playthrough where you just rush the bosses, like you do only what you need to do to clear through the game, would also have very little variance. The objectives that you strictly speaking need to clear Elden Ring are actually pretty linear, right? They're a little open-ended in a kind of weird way, in that we have Godric, Rennala, Radahn, you could do Rykard, maybe just those four, and you need to kill any two of them to advance. Almost everybody will do Godric and Rennala, but you could do Radahn and Rykard. That's not realistic. People who laser focus that will have a pretty similar experience, sure. When I played, I don't know why, but I don't count. I'm just weird. But I pretty much immediately went here and didn't realize that this Stormvale Castle is where the like first major boss is, and that Rhea Lucaria, which I was trying to get into, is where the second major boss is. But I'm confident that is not a common experience, don't you think? That probably isn't what most people experience. Probably a very large majority of players killed Godric and then Rennala. And you could kill Rykard and Radahn if you just really didn't want to have the same experience again. But I'm not trying, I don't mean to be arguing that like means that it's not very linear. I think that's a great point, Ted Katinsky, that there will be a lot of players who don't do the side content, and for those people the game arguably just is linear as well, for sure. Yes, I think that's a good point. And Mr. Fruit, you're just clarifying that the thing you're arguing is not that the quantitative experience isn't different. It definitely is. Like, people do have a large variance in the stuff they have in their account if they explore anything on the side at all. You're arguing, hey, and that's nice, but you're arguing more that the qualitative experience is surprisingly not that different, which I can understand. You do these dungeons and not those dungeons, and you get those rewards and not these rewards, but is that really that different? And I can see the perspective that no, it's not. That I don't think that's that weird of a take, no. I hope I'm not coming across as thinking that's that weird. That makes sense to me. I do personally still think it's significantly different, though. I think the order that people do zones in, and whether they and how much they look stuff up and hear community sentiment, these are things that are different in all games, but I think they make Elden Ring more different because there are archetypes that are fully not enabled, fully not supported by the game, unless you look up where to find them. And I think there are lots of elements in games like this where there are whole parts of the game that it's not practical that you will find unless you look it up. I'm not entirely sure why developers keep putting those things in. There's not no benefit to them, but it's sort of weird how prevalent they are, in my opinion. And that's definitely true in Elden Ring. There's a lot of content in the game, especially toward the latter half of the game, that is really weird. Like the developers are doing something odd, and they put a lot of effort, a weird amount of effort, into like hiding the content so that people can't play it. And I don't. That's very strange. But that does create more variance. But that's more the latter half of the game. And the bosses get after you do your rune holders, Radon, Rennala, Godric, Rykard, pick two, or you could do them all. Then you fight a series of quite linear bosses. Then it opens up again to an extent. Then you also again fight a quite linear series of bosses. So it's definitely true that there is a way to play the game a lot of people experience that is not that it is more similar. It literally just is linear, you could say. Sure. But I see what you mean, Mr. Fruit. There's a lot of parts where, like, you do this dungeon or that dungeon, you get this or that piece of loot. This is a heavy weapon that does good stagger damage. This is a spell, but it's also a heavy spell, you know, it has a slow cast time, that does good stagger damage. Absolutely, that could be surprisingly similar in terms of experience. In many ways, the reason Elden Ring works as a game, as an open world, if you consider it to work in this way, which I do, but I could see people questioning that, is that a lot of the things you get in the game are comparable to each other. Absolutely. That there are like other long-range things besides Frenzy Burst, for example. It's not like this is the only thing or the only incantation. There are things that are accessible to a variety of builds, etc. And then you gave a comparison point, which is very helpful. Like the run-to-run difference, if you play through the game again, could be way more different in something like a computer role-playing game, like Baldur's Gate 3, for example. You could argue the differences are a little more meaningful. Even just playing a different build and doing the same content in Baldur's Gate 3 versus Elden Ring, in my opinion, is a more different experience than it is in Elden Ring. That's very subjective, but I think that the types of things you need to contend with are more different in Baldur's Gate 3 if you play like really different builds versus in Elden Ring if you do everything you can to make that really different. I don't think there is as much difference, I guess, which is not necessarily bad. I feel like in some ways that's necessary to make the combat work, but yeah. Okay, let me break because we actually went way too long. In fact, in a way, we went so long that we should really just end the stream here. But I want to keep going for a little bit because we missed last week. So let's do that. And there's a couple of things I wanted to catch back up on chat later. But I thought this was a good example of good test run of finding out where we were disagreeing. I mean, as I was saying before, there's an element where disagreements sort of don't even exist as such. Like, Mr. Food and I didn't really disagree in that one of us thought that the exact same understanding of the open world is a different experience for different people. And then the other person thought the exact same understanding of the open world wasn't a different experience. It is, of course, that we were not talking about the same thing. And the goal of the discussion really ought to be reframed as, what is each person talking about? It was not at all reasonable to assume that we were on the same page. And I tried not to. We were ironically literally having a conversation about that. But I personally still feel like that was a good example of it would have been helpful to a little bit over-assume that we were not on the same page. And you did a really good job, Mr. Root. I thought that one was a good trial run of that. But yeah, I don't know. I've got a lot more thoughts about the thing we talked about before as well. Let's break here, and then we can still play a little more. We can probably do the rest of this, and then let's get Rennala out of the way. That's not going to be that bad. I just need to qualify for a weapon that I don't despise using, and that I can actually hit enemies with. I'm just bad, but we need to find a weapon that will suit the bill. And suit the bill, that's interesting. Fit the bill. We haven't done this in a while, and I really need to, so let's go below decks. Thanks for watching the show, folks. We have very new follows and subscribers recently because the stream we've missed a lot of streams. There's been a lot of bad stuff in my personal life on Thursdays. But thank you, Ragnavar, for the recent subscription for 50 months. Prime sub for 50 months. 50 months. That is a long time. I don't think you're here today, but you're here almost all of these streams, so thank you for your support. And thanks to the new follows. We got Axibath and Dr. Belk from previous streams. Welcome aboard. It's been good to have you folks. We get new people really slowly on these streams, which is kind of nice because it usually means it's a very coherent or involved discussion space. I keep trying to say intimate, and I know most people are not thinking of the meaning of intimate that I'm meaning when I say that. So I'll be right back in a few. Hello and welcome back to our little midstream Q&A break segment. This one is from True Parley Grandmaster Foot, but instead of the first letter being capitalized and all the other letters being lowercase in each word, the first letter is lowercase and everything else is capitalized. Okay. I've been playing Silksong and it got me thinking about difficulty. Sure. A boss fight can often feel like an exam where you are tasked to solve the combat puzzle until you get a passing grade. Let's have the topic be difficulty equals exam? Question mark? As a model of difficulty. With Silksong, I feel deeply frustrated because their idea of difficulty often boiled down to making the exam really long and punishing you really heavily for mistakes. There is little to no strategy with a decent chunk of the bosses. They are just dodge one attack, get one hit in, as if I were to design an exam with math on fractions, and that exam had 200 calculations on it. Sure, that is a hard exam, but if you put enough questions on it, you're bound to make mistakes. Asking me 20 or 30 math problems on fractions would also have been sufficient to check my understanding. What are your thoughts on how to scale these exam situations in video games? Because to me, this kind of scaling isn't fun, but feels like it's wasting my time. Sure. Yeah, I think there's kind of two ways to go about this. The first one is, I do think that you're orbiting around this thing that I agree with, which is that there is a good length and balance of combat that I believe is somewhat objective. It's not completely objective, but it's not like all forms of you have a certain amount of health, enemy does a certain amount of damage, enemy attacks a certain speed, enemy has a certain amount of health, or you do a certain amount of damage. It's not like all parameters of those make games that are equally fun. There will be people that will like pretty much any game with those qualities that you make. You can mix and match them however you want, and there are games that do this, that some people enjoy. But I believe that for it to have a sensible design, for there to be a good reason why people would reliably enjoy it, and if you were to analyze the games that have endured in popularity among people who enjoy this kind of thing over the years, it's actually not very subjective what formula makes sense. For example, I would argue that being one-shotted is somewhat objectively bad. There are some people that enjoy that, but mostly when they have tired of the other things. And I would argue that for most of humanity, and that this will not change much going forward, you should be able to tank one hit, before the fight ends. I often give a similar example to your math problem one, where I'll say something like, let's say the boss does attacks twice as fast, but only does half as much damage. And that half as much damage brings the boss from one-shotting you to two-shotting you, but they attack twice as often. You get twice as many chances to show that you can dodge an attack, and it only matters half as much if you get hit, but you do also have to succeed at dodging more often. You've basically created a fight that is the same average difficulty-ish. I know this is a hand-wavy example, but you just die less. You specifically don't die as much, but you don't really need to do things that much better or worse. It's just a better test in some ways. If you make one little mistake, and that's considered bad, I think you need to begin to discuss what the purpose of the exam is. And that's going to segue us into my other point, which is that for most people, the purpose of the exam is not to test perfection, basically. There are people that want this, but I hope it's fair to say, I'm not saying that's a bad motivation. I don't care, really. I don't think it's a good motivation, but it's fine. You can enjoy whatever you want. We have to agree that it's not the same motivation as what other people want. When most people play these games, they do not want to be demanded perfection of. They want to do the combat. They want to fight the enemy. I would say most people are orbiting around something like both parties get hits in, you take damage. If the fight's close, a lot of people celebrate that kind of thing, so some amount of balance. Again, I would argue you can pretty clearly see that people don't want to be one-shotted, but it's also meaningful for each attack to feel weighty. There's something kind of, it feels kind of weird to say, but like good feeling about when an attack chops off like a huge amount of your health bar. That's sort of satisfying in some way, but specifically not by it one-shotting you, just doing a lot of damage, that kind of thing. And so if you combine all these qualities together, you get a game that is fairly similar to the Souls games combat. I think pretty similar to Elden Ring's combat. This is not my game with the favorite combat of any game I've ever played, but I do think that this is a good combat model in that if you build such that you do not get one-shotted by anything, you mostly get 2 or 3 shotted by things. The combat feels very threatening, but there is room to recover from mistakes if you're careful, and it's tense. Again, that thing in these games where enemies will try to catch you drinking a heal. You can't just roll out of the way and spam drinking a heal. These games are designed with enemies that are designed to kill you if you do that. You have to think on your feet and live in that tension for a little while, which I think is really cool. And I think a lot of people, more people than like it now would like if you explain to them that that is the goal, but I think a lot of people do enjoy once they understand that. And many people who find these games frustrating or cheap maybe don't see that perspective of how the difficulty is trying to work and might enjoy a game that gives you a little more time. But how much more time? You see what I mean? Certainly there will be people who want a game that doesn't try to catch you trying to heal. But how much tension are they willing to lose? It would orbit around a relatively similar point, right? Certainly, in your example, it wouldn't be a test with 200 calculations on it. Maybe it would be 10, maybe it would be 30, maybe even 50 sometimes, and maybe even 1 on occasions. But there's only a range, and I find it hard to believe that there is a good reason for the game to ask you to do it, right, 200 times. I haven't played Silksong, but if it's anything like the original Hollow Knight, there's a lot of stuff in the game, so there's also not really a reason to make the player need to do that one fight over and over again. If we were to talk about this more, I do have a second point that I can make briefly, but would take some time to unpack, which is that I think a lot of people don't think of it like an exam, and they think that way of thinking of it is a little sterile, and they're saying they want to be in the tense moment of fighting the boss, for longer. I would just argue that maybe there's a common point where you would both enjoy the fight if, the game made you, again, under tension, but tankier to an extent. You didn't have to be punished as heavily, but you could be punished more often. Maybe that would be better in some cases, and would be a place where people could enjoy that tension, while it would not be unreasonable for other people. So yeah, I think this is an interesting subject. I think that people are often really hand-wavy with difficulty, and I don't think it's that subjective. And I think we might actually all agree more than it seems like we do if we can just frame what we each think is good or bad about it the right way. So I definitely see your frustration. If you want to leave a question for these ARRchive Parley, you can do that using a link in the chat right now. If you leave something there, I'll answer it this time next week on Twitch ARRchive Parley. For now, on with the show. Welcome back. Just a quick other thank you to people supporting the stream more. Asymptomatic, thank you for the very generous tip. I believe that one was around my birthday, so I appreciate it very much. Thank you. And Russell, you became a recent patron. I've still got a decent amount of new Patreon folks, mostly for Parley, and that means a lot to me. It sounds like the discussions we've had have been enough that some of you have enjoyed them and wanted more. So that's very encouraging, thank you. Being that my YouTube channel has been in limbo for a long time, the Zanipants one, it is encouraging that a lot of that is still working. That when I get that channel going again, it will probably still work. Obviously, this has been a very scary period of my career for me, so just thank you very much. I appreciate it. Welcome back. Yeah, one thing I was going to say about the difficulty thing in Hollow Knight and Elden Ring and games like this is that flasks are that way of healing where in the original Hollow Knight you don't drink a thing, but you charge up for a sec and expend some mana to get a heal. That thing, you know, that whole mechanic could be seen as a way to make it so you can actually have a very large amount of health, but because you can't hold that much of it at any given time, but you can still hold enough of it that you don't get one-shotted, there's tension to the fight while you actually technically could get hit a lot of times as long as you manage it in such a way. And yeah, like I think that's really interesting. Like that is sort of the like purpose of that mechanic, which I think is a good idea for getting a game to have more tension in its design while still allowing you in theory to heal more. I do personally like the mechanic in Hollow Knight where when you hit enemies, like in combat against the boss, you gain basically mana and you can use that to heal. And so you can come back a lot if you manage to get a lot of hits without getting hit back. And it also makes it feel a little less weird where it's like, okay, I've got all this healing juice, but I can't like hold it all at once. You know what I mean? There's something pleasing to me from a, I guess, like theme perspective that the knight in Hollow Knight actually generates the healing energy during the fight. I know that kind of doesn't matter from a game design perspective. It's just a different way to do it. But I think that feels a little bit better in some ways. The idea that you actually didn't have all that many health potions, but you generate more by succeeding at the fight for a little while is interesting to me. Like, that's a cool idea for a mechanic in my opinion. But yeah, I am gonna say something a little harsh. I think Hollow Knight is a game that's really pretty instead of time spent thinking about its game design, which is what a lot of these smaller indie games are. And it's a shame, because if they had committed to making sure the challenge was philosophically cogent, if you like, and not just like really punishing rather than necessarily difficult, because they are a very small development team, they would have been able to do it exactly the way they wanted to. I'm basically at the point where I feel like if a game is made by a large group of developers, you cannot make the game have consistently good game design. It's just not really possible to get everybody on the same page unless only a few people have creative control and they exercise that creative control. So if you have a small team, you are the one who has the chance to make a game with solid game design, and I don't think that was their number one priority. It's amazing how good some of those fights are and a lot of the abilities are, despite that being the case. But the actual boss fights in Hollow Knight, like, I liked the aesthetic of the fight a lot. I don't think I actually enjoyed the fights that much, personally. Whereas a lot of the Elden Ring fights, I would describe them as being like a roller coaster ride. I kind of like being on. Like, I want to fight the boss again a lot of the time after I've done a fight. It's sort of fun. There are some bosses in Elden Ring that I personally think have too little HP. It is easy enough to make a big damage engine in this game that I think sometimes you can kill bosses too fast and you kind of don't get to experience the fight. I don't have any idea how likely that is to go over well with you all, but that's how I feel sometimes. And I would really like more multi-phase boss fights like Rennala to an extent, where it's okay for that phase to end quickly, but I don't want the fight to end that fast. That was a really good example of why you shouldn't panic roll. But I was distracted by what I was saying and was trying to flask half of those times. That would have been bad too. I probably still would have died. That was a hilarious example of panic rolling being bad. Just to get back to this quickly, Ted Kadensky, you pointed out this thing that I didn't really cover at all in my answer to Mr. Fruit's Parlay, because I think it's a different subject, but it is relevant. You said respecting your opponent, or needing to, you know, like avoid one big but punishable move, or respecting that you need to be on the back foot is your ideal difficulty. I just wanted to clarify that I feel like that is a related but separate concept that is more about the model of how the fight wants you to, how it's going to be challenging. Do you need to time an attack a certain way? Do you need to be patient? I would describe the Souls-like formula as being defined by patience-based difficulty. That thing you're referring to as like respecting the opponent's attack. There's a thing that a lot of people who play, I think Monster Hunter is kind of like this as well, has that kind of patience-based difficulty mostly, where players new to these games will often just try to attack and get off their thing, and what they want is a game where they just do their big move. Whereas I think a lot of people who enjoy these games get to a point where they understand that the fight is meant to be a sort of combat dance, basically. And if you just wait until the opponent is done attacking, I think it often becomes really easy in many of these games. I think the test of these games' difficulty is, if you are patient, is it just trivial afterward? And Elden Ring, personally, I feel is a case where not really, no. But Hollow Knight, I don't know. If you have the stamina to keep dodging and you are willing to not like change your strategy because you basically get fatigued or tired, I think it pretty much is easy once you are willing to be patient. You could argue inhumanly patient. Sure, that's not to say it is easy in practice. But yeah, that's a good example, right? Katensky, you said something like neutral in a fighting game, or like zoning in a fighting game. That idea of like respecting the opponent's range or ability to do a thing. I think that when people who haven't played these games that much play them, they don't think of things like, okay, that wolf can attack at this range, so I picture a sort of invisible box or arc where I know I'm not actually safe if I'm here, because if I drink my flask here, the wolf AI is programmed to punish me, and it has an attack that will come out fast enough to... It is very fighting game-like. I don't know why I didn't think of that metaphor on my own. That's... yes. But just to say that obviously you can do difficulty differently within that model, and Hollow Knight is here a useful example because I would argue it does do that same difficulty for the most part, except in a very different way in other ways, like damage balancing and stuff, than the way Elden Ring does. Hollow Knight is a little different. Most Hollow Knight enemies, as I remember them, are more like scripted. You know, they will mostly do attacks just like on a timer in an area, but they still respond to where the player's position is, so there's still a similar element of respecting the enemy's range, especially when you settle down to heal as the knight. Yeah, like threat range is a term people might find useful here. Yep, Bionic Me, I would agree with that. Feather, you said a lot of it comes into skill floor versus skill ceiling too. What's the worst you can do while still surviving? How hard would it be to be perfect in the fight? What's the gap between the answers to those two questions? Interesting point. Yep. How bad can you do and still survive? Or another way I often think of it, because of course I do, is how much can you use a build to delete the difficulty? Like if you have a good enough build, how much worse can you be at the video game, like the mechanics, I guess, and still succeed? And the answer in a lot of these games is a lot. I think like Lies of P is a good example. I think you can carry the hell out of Lies of P if you just make like a good setup and are willing to adapt with your tools instead of just trying to be good at the boss fight. You just try to counter the boss fight. I personally feel like Lies of P gets dramatically easier if you do that, which I think is great. I think it's really good that the game is willing to say, yeah, we'll give you an actually meaningful advantage for adapting to the enemy's behavior. I feel like a lot of games have these tools, but it just, at the end of the day, that's just not that much of the difficulty. At least that's been my experience in the past. With a lot of these games. We're not actually going to go down here yet. I just thought it was a nice vista while we prepare for the boss fight beyond that one door. And you can see Rhea Lucaria from here, which is kind of satisfying. And that air tree. And Ronnie's tower. And a lot of stuff. It's pretty. Go full bad and win with memes. Indeed. I liked... just as an aside, since we're winding down for a sec, Bionic Me said, you may have heard that Silksong introduces a lot more double damage stuff throughout the game, but I will also say the healing mechanic is completely different and feels much better to use in fights. Asymptomatic, you said, I've heard basically nothing because I have negative interest in Hollow Knight Silksong for it being 40% or more of the thumbnails in my feed. And Bionic Me said, oh, buck your contrarian instincts once in a while and acknowledge that something can be popular in tandem with being good. Speaking from experience. Asymptomatic probably replied, motion denied, next question, which I thought was a delightful exchange of, I hope you both know that you're... I think Asymptomatic, you do sometimes begrudgingly do that. But I had the same thought, Bionic Me. I, tongue-in-cheek, felt like, well, I'm not sure about Hollow Knight Silksong specifically, but there definitely are these things where you might not want to play it when it's popular, because there's not much reason to do that. But just the thing being a thing a lot of people like definitely shouldn't, like, damage it. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting point. Ragnavar, welcome back. Good timing. Let's have a spot of tea to prepare for the challenge ahead. I don't think this fight's going to be that bad, but I've been playing like garbage today. So you want to play it before it's popular. Oh, see, that's the trick. To be my hated hipster archetype, you have to play it before it's popular. I was suggesting playing it after it's popular. That's how you think on the next level. That's what you got to do. All is forgiven if I find it first. That's a pretty hipster thing to do. Yeah. I just think it's plain to see what the drawbacks of thinking that way are. I don't need to drill you any more on it. And I feel like you yourself are actually not as stuck in this way of thinking as you profess to be. Asymptomatic. I hope that I say that with affection. I hope that doesn't come across as me saying, no, you actually do like popular things, which is somehow so bad. I just, its popularity ought to be ignored is the main thing. Except that I agree with you a little bit that yes, a game that is more popular does very slightly correlate with it being a little worse as far as game design, because the general public often doesn't care about that much. The game being flashy and having a nice trailer often means, well, they did not spend as much time, or they're not focusing as much marketing on it being good. I guess it just has the further point that, like, well, but a game that is completely unknown also doesn't correlate with it being any better. And so there's somewhere in the middle where it's probably not an especially unpopular game, but it's not the most popular game. And yes, statistically that probably does correlate with slightly better design, but obviously the ideal would be to just completely ignore its popularity. And not to be a hipster, which is to say I like it because it is unpopular, or I perceive it as unpopular. But also not to deny that the things that are popular are often a little shallow. Bionic Me, you said, we need a concise word for someone who sees a game after it's popular and deems it dead, and thus not worth their time, even if it's not necessarily a multiplayer game. A bit like an inverse hipster. I think you've done an excellent job, Bionic Me. Inverse hipster is badass. Unbelievably based. Trend chaser is probably what people actually say, but inverse hipster is amazing. I love that. Okay, tea time. Mini tea time, because we're gonna fight what's-her-face, that Moon Knight in the way, and I've been complete garbage potato land today, so I need all the help I can get. We should move on in. What do we got today? What did I bring? It's been like 2 hours that we've been live, so I don't know what tea I picked out. Did I even bring it over? Oh, yeah. I broke up some of you who've been watching the Friday tea time streams remember these tea cakes. These are 200-gram bitter leaf night and day tea cakes that are a 50-50 black and white tea blend that has this really interesting like cherry syrup tasting note. Not like cough syrup, like a really natural juicy cherry note, but it's pretty dry. It's not very sweet. It's been really good, and I broke up some of those cakes in this loose tin I had around. You can't see that at all. You can't see any of that at all. Into little pieces, so it would be easy to drink casually when I didn't want to break off a piece of tea. So I'm gonna have some of that today. And I can very easily do that by just grabbing some flake-a-doos and putting them in, instead of having to actually break up the tea cake myself. Look at this nice thing I did for my future self. Lovely. Do you want to see in the tin? You don't need to see in the tin. Anyway, it's a bunch of, you can see, it's like not completely loose, but it's been broken up quite a bit. And we go. This tea will want a brief very brief rinse to unfurl all the leaves, but it should be mostly fine. We're doing 3.5 grams today. It's a full session. Feeling schmancy today. We in no way have enough water to actually do that on the stream. Sorry, there was a boiling hot drop of water that dripped down the side and burned my finger. So that's why I dropped it loudly. But such is brewing tea on the stream. Just swizzle that around. And we can just pour the rinse out. Love it. Leave those for a minute. And keep talking about... I think it became hipster time, actually. Bionic you said the vibe is less trend chasing and more. If people haven't been sticking with this game in great numbers even after this time, then that must mean it's bad, right? There is something different than the trend chaser thing, right? It is the same in practice, I think, but the assumption is different. I like that, Bionic Me. The assumption is, I think you basically nailed it, that there is something that proves the game isn't good if people haven't stuck with the game beyond a certain amount of time. And I think that doesn't make no sense, as many of these oversimplifications don't. It doesn't make no sense to think that. That's just not as good of a tool as people wish it was for deciding what is good. Again, all these things, not liking something because it's popular, liking something because it is popular, etc., are all either an attempt to oversimplify just analyzing the quality of the product, which is what you would ideally do if you had infinite time, or a way to feel included or special by being not included with the culture. If you don't mind me throwing out for a moment that you like the games that you like because you think it makes you a better person to like those kinds of games instead of just liking what's fun to you, if you don't mind me just throwing that out for now, then we're left with how good of an oversimplification is the game is popular. And the answer is not very good. and that's that. It's not actually completely terrible, but it's not that good. It's not that hard to use a better heuristic. Ragnavar, welcome back, by the way. You said, a game cannot become popular without some level of the ephemeral goodness. They're just not likely to properly inflesh the game design bones they have. I feel like this is the good version of this thought tool. It probably will be like good in the really obvious ways. I think that the kind of fly in the ointment for game design is that in game design, we have an element of games that is not commonly perceived as being like good on the surface, which is the game design. In a movie or like a book or a TV show, the popular things will be very polished in ways that are outwardly visible. And almost everything about the piece of entertainment is outwardly visible. So it's not that bad to use that as a heuristic for not what's like really good or interesting or entertaining, but certainly what is like not bad, sure, right? For the most part, these things are like fine. I think where it goes wrong for gaming is that I feel people almost completely do not evaluate the actual game design of the game. And one of the reasons is that you can't until you've played a lot of the game. And so by the time you've represented that you bought the game, you've talked about the game, you've played a lot of the game, you have Steam achievement statistics added to the game, you have not yet, arguably, you haven't yet been able to identify whether the game is going to have enjoyable design. And so you could argue it's unfair of me to say like people just don't care about good design. That's not really what I'm saying. But I do feel like this is why popular games are worse. When I say worse, that's what I mean, than other popular media. The quality is a little worse. Games can become popular with less of that ephemeral goodness because of game design, basically. And games can be so fun because if the game design is good and you somehow find the damn game, then yes, I think that is better. So yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. And Ragnavar, I really liked your point of focusing in on, this is a straightforward thing to do, but I thought it was good that you did it. This idea that the main thing is that they're going to be like average, you know, they're going to be it's like ChatGPT, you know, they're going to be very good at doing it like okay, but then largely bereft of things that would make something amazing, or like really stand out. And so in some ways, completely avoiding that kind of thing makes total sense, right? I mean, if there are enough other good games, which there are, if you didn't play anything that was ever in the top 30 on Steam, I don't know, I'm just making up something random. There are enough good games that you would have infinite good things to play, and you would avoid things that are almost exclusively highly derivative, which could be seen as a very efficient use of your time. But now and again, I do think something with excellent game design just happens to get into that top 30, and I don't feel like that's a good reason to avoid it. It's just, yeah, I would ignore this, but then if something you like, you know, if something is popular, and then on your own, you already knew it was popular, and you go, oh, that seems like it has really good game design. Huh, that game is surprisingly popular for having such nice design. How odd. What an unusual thing. Huh. Time to go play it. I get where I fall off the wagon with this is that it seems insane. You're welcome to do it. It's interesting to hear you talk about it, but it seems crazy to me to, in that situation, to say, but I won't play the game because it has before been like widely popular. It's like, isn't it worth acknowledging that this is just the one that breaks the path? Like, I don't know. Let's just say it another way. When Baldur's Gate 3 became very popular, I honestly felt, why is this popular? Not this is not good. I thought it was amazing, but it's good in ways that I was surprised appealed to a large number of people. And so I thought, wow, I'm surprised that's as popular as it is. I guess people must just really want this thing right now. It feels connected to the D&D boom, and then you can kind of just play D&D, and also COVID floating around, kind of petering out, but not everywhere in the world. So that, you know, but to have that make you not want to play it retroactively, or you said if you find it first, you usually don't mind. But you'll know it's popular and then later come back to it for your own reasons, but then go, oh wait, no, because that's popular, I then won't. So yeah, I don't know. I think that for me is the fly in the ointment here. Let me get to your responses. I just wanted to make an attempt to puzzle it out myself. And by let me get to your responses, I mean let me brew this tea. Is this a good version of this stream? Are we doing a good job? Like, was this one good? I don't really know. We'll let that go for, with this amount of tea, probably only like a minute and a half. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Ooh, my least favorite thing, the hidden gem. Ugh, calling everything a hidden gem. If anything isn't telegraphed with a loudspeaker from a Zeppelin, then it's a hidden gem. Like, stop it. Like, that's just normal things. And of course, where that comes from is that a lot of people in our culture genuinely believe if something is popular, it can't be bad. It must be good. And so if something is really good, how could it not be popular? Not understanding that that's magic thinking, and obviously people have to like know about it. And also it's not as simple as how popular it is. There's general appeal and specific appeal. And you all probably already know this, so I won't waste our sadly limited time on this earth talking about that subject. Yeah, asymptomatic, you've brought this up a little bit before, but I thought it's worth coming back to. You said, I mostly attribute my taste to a very strong allergy to should. My coworkers all tell me about anime I should watch, and despite otherwise trusting them, the specimens they name get irrevocably pushed down my list. Echo this for game recommendations not found with my own compass. Yeah, I mean, I definitely hear that. In some ways, it's a response to people very overly giving you very shallow recommendations, is what it sounds like to me, which I can definitely relate to. I have been there. And I think the only reason I don't feel that way now is because I've had sufficiently more recommendations from people who have a specific reason to recommend it to me, such that now when my friend recommends me Monster Hunter Wilds, I don't go, people are nitpicking and biased to even like that, and instead go, you did give me a specific reason, so I mean, it could be good at that and still be popular. To be honest with you all, I personally feel like many of the games that have done really well, like numerically, lots of people have enjoyed them in our culture in the past 5 years that I have also liked. I'm not sure I like them for the same reason other people do. To be blunt, I'm not entirely sure that people like those games for why they are good game design. I think it's just that people have not like played a CRPG before, and some people didn't know how badly they wanted that, for example. I wonder how much that's true. Now, not everybody. Again, there's still a very large, not vocal majority, a silent majority of people that like play things because they're good and it's really cool. And I've absolutely been gotten by this. Some of you might remember last year on the stream when I did an IPA, an India Pale Ale, the kind of beer tasting. And I had this bias that nobody would like IPA. They're just bitter and weird. And I like beer, but those are just gross. And there's a ton of them all the time. And it's just because people want a crazy sounding thing to drink when they go out with their friends. That's dumb, and I'm stupid for thinking that. But to be fair, the reason I made that stupid mistake is partly because people do that kind of thing. Just, it doesn't really add up that would be that wide of a beer industry would be that way. And like, it's not that hard to get, like, figure out your taste in beer. That's not that hard. This is more like cocktail culture, where people order something that sounds, you know, like fancy or sophisticated or just sugary, and then drink that. And that doesn't really mean they like it or that they like cocktails. They just mean they like getting drunk. And there are people that like cocktails, but they are not really talking about the same thing. And that's all fine, all well and good. And I had elided that into beer culture, what I had thought of as IPA culture. I just went out and bought 8 different IPAs that seemed different to me after cross-referencing a ton of Reddit threads, basically, and writing down what people recommended and then seeing what came up more times, but also in what context did it come up and what styles, and trying to spread out the styles. And I had a great time, and I love IPA, and I've had a great experience with drinking IPA over the years because of course I have. Like, it's like, it doesn't matter if they're popular, it's not going to affect their flavor. And asymptomatic, I hope I'm not trying to make you sound like an idiot saying this. I apologize. It's just the counterpoint to, I've definitely done something similar where I tried it a little bit and went, no, this is good, and I was just being a pill. And I'm not accusing you of doing such a thing. It is absolutely very suspect how a lot of people like things. I totally agree with that. And there's a huge and constantly underestimated impulse by the general population to like things because to say they like things because they want to be a part of the conversation, not really at all to do with like why the thing is the way it is, the things about the thing. I've been reading the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, and I'm on Words of Radiance. That's book 2, if you've been reading this. And right around the part of the book that I'm in, they introduce a character named Lift. And Lift is interesting. She has seemed to, I don't know, this isn't a spoiler because it's almost certainly wrong. I met Lift 2 pages ago, and she hasn't been in the book at all since. She seems to have broken the magic system somehow. She is a child, and she has a lot of access to the magic system that in a way other people don't. And it seems like she maybe wished or asked a sort of fairy or a spirit god for something that was interpreted as, let me break the magic system, and she got what she wanted. And that's interesting in and of itself. This character is very childish, and she values being childish and being playful and a bit of a little shit. And I think it's been fun to watch this character. But I heard this thing where on the internet somebody was saying, I hate listening to the parts of the book about Lift so much that I'm not going to read any more of the interconnected books, you know, this whole huge series they've been reading, and they're just going to drop it because they don't personally like this character. Do people think that to enjoy a piece of media you need to personally vibe with every single character in it? And the answer is, some people do feel that way, yes. Like, to them, the Stormlight Archive is about edgy people being badass. That's not what it's about to me, but I can see how you might think you like it if you think that's what it's about. So to them, if there's a childish character in it, that just breaks it for them. The things they like are one-to-one their personality, and so if they don't like that character, they can't read the book, because if they do, that would make them childish. Can't have that, and so they have to just not read it. My way of reconciling these situations is obviously they really don't like the book for what it is, right? And I would argue if they enjoyed the things about the book that are trying to be good, it probably wouldn't be enough to stop them that they just didn't like one side character that much, right? The answer must be that they wanted to feel part of the conversation about this popular series, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back. But they think that that's what everybody does when they say they like things. They don't think this is fake liking. Now, I do understand that sometimes the character just fucks with everything. You'll just have to take my word for it, Ragnavar, that I could give you a literary analysis of the lift parts of the book, and they are rather objectively written the exact same way as the rest of the book. She does think of things in her own mental narrative slightly differently, but many of the parts of the book are written almost exactly the same. I actually think this is a little bit bad, but it does make them very similar to the rest of his work, the way he structures other passages. So I hear you. I'm not trying to be closed-minded. It doesn't matter what this person specifically thinks. I'm not trying to accuse them. Just making the point that, like, yeah, that seems a little weird, but then there is another perspective that I just don't have. Well, I mean, I know of it, just not my perspective. Where, yeah, it makes total sense to not be able to read an entire series just because you think one book, I don't know, like, insults your sense of edgelorditude. That isn't weird in a certain way, I guess. And to be clear, like, I've definitely had this situation before myself. Asymptomatic, you said, I will totally drop books I otherwise enjoy for a bad apple being introduced. Perfectly relatable. But I wonder if you would feel this way if you'd read all of this. It's just such a small part of the book, and is written in a way that is so similar to the rest of the book. And there is such a large variety of characters in these books. I'm not sure it's quite the same thing. I think you're both maybe thinking of something a little more realistic, where, yeah, the character really derails it. For an example from Sanderson's own work, Mistborn Era 2, after Mistborn Era 1 being a dark, really, really interesting deconstruction of, like, the fantasy hero's journey genre, but then Mistborn Era 2 is just a pop western, like a pulp western. Especially for the first few books, like the first 2 books. I happened to like those, but they are undeniably a massive tone shift from the rest of his work. The rest of the Cosmere, anyway. So yeah, like, I completely understand how some people would go, yeah, man, like, that's just weird. It's not what I signed up for. It's not what people signed up for sure. I hear what you're saying, Ragnavar, about the magic circle thing, and I think that's a good concept to bring up here, that for everybody, there are certain things that break the rules of, like, a fiction or a fantasy to them, and everybody has different ones. I am making a rather strong claim and saying I think that some make no sense, and it is a little silly to have those things be a thing that breaks your sense of, or something that minor, basically. This is the equivalent of everybody has a different shaped rock that will break their magic circle, but most people, a grain of sand will not break their magic circle, regardless of what shape it is. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. That would be like dropping a book because it uses a piece of vocabulary you don't like, to me. But I think you're making a good point. I'm just trying to explain where I'm coming from by feeling this way. Feather, you said, for me, whether or not the author seems to know that the bad apple is a bad apple greatly affects how much my dislike of the character translates to the rest of the work. Right, and, like, here, I feel like it's very clear that this writer knows that this character is different, and the whole book is not going to be derailed to be like this. But what if the grain of sand is just really annoying? And, like, sure, like, I do hear you. And I think Bionic Me and Ragnavar, you're right. Like, that is ultimately what it is. Just to say that that is a whole experience. Again, we're not really here. I am just dunking on this person, which is not really the point. I'm sorry. We're just here to notice that this is certainly a way people do think. Like, it could be something that small. I hope it's fair to acknowledge that it is an objectively small thing. Whether it makes sense or not for that objectively small thing to ruin their experience, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's fine. I shouldn't have gotten derailed with that. The point of this part of the discussion was just meant to be that my tea is cooling off and I wanted something to talk about with you all with this beautiful landscape. Checks notes nervously that it modifies how people will have the things that their experience is broken around. And so asymptomatic for you, if the pressure of other people being obsessed about a thing and overly plugging something damages your experience of it, I'm not really trying to say I think that's silly, just that can be different, and it is extremely advantageous for it to be different. Likewise, for this other person, Mr. Fruit, you said maybe the thing you're looking for is less that these perspectives don't make sense and more that they are immature. Sure, like, not the thing with asymptomatic. I really do think I have experienced that perspective, and I think it's fine. But this person bothered by this small thing, yes, I guess that's what I'm getting at, Mr. Fruit. Like, you can't really live in the real world if something of that size bothers you. That is sort of what I'm leading up to. And I'm the first one to say, I mean, you can reject living in the real world and say people's standards suck and everything sucks and it's bad, so you shouldn't accept other people's standards. Like, okay, but you do need to have like some give and take where you're willing to say, how big of a thing will I make this much of a fuss over? And I feel like that person's take on that is completely non-viable. Like, you cannot imagine this person living the rest of their life functionally. I don't know. Yeah, Mr. Fruit, to be clear, I knew you meant the Stormlight Archive thing. I was just clarifying from what I was saying that I think asymptomatic, you're in a similar but different boat where I think I kind of get being that bothered by other people being so eager to plug a thing. And if you like something and other people just plug the hell out of it, I feel that can absolutely ruin it, for sure. That's totally a phenomenon as well. Bionic Me, you said the notion that people ever do things just to be part of the conversation, or in other ways just chase general trends, seems entirely nonsensical to me. And I agree, Bionic Me. I guess part of the reason I always bring these points up is that I think it would derail a lot of discussions like this if people in the discussion didn't like have it as an available explanation that people do this. Like, that absolutely is a widespread thing that people do. You can go find examples of people doing it or documenting the psychology of doing it all over human history. But at the same time, I basically just relate to you as well. To me, it's absurd that somebody would do that. I just know for a fact that many people do that. And so when discussing these things, there's a possibility I wouldn't have otherwise entertained, which is that the thing is popular almost entirely because people want to be part of the conversation and barely at all because of the thing's quality. And I think people underestimate just how true that can be. And so sometimes it feels like we have to accept that if something is popular, it must be good. It can't possibly be that it isn't really good, because how else would it become so popular? There is an important additional factor involved, which is that people just have this thing, I guess, where they desperately want to be part of the conversation. That's the only reason I bring it up as such. I think if you're in the position where that's nonsensical and you can't understand it, I mean, good, because it's not a very helpful thing to think. It would be better if everybody could just disabuse themselves of the idea that, like, it's good to like things so you can be part of the conversation. You can just, like, have people in your life that you don't need to be fake to enjoy talking to. You don't have to do that. The drop in quality of your entertainment needing to do that is so massive that it's probably worth just not having friends at that point. Especially most people's friends. But anyway. But yeah, ultimately we've massively, I mean, and why not? This is what this stream is. We've massively overcomplicated the very simple point that, as Mr. Fruit puts it, things get popular for reasons. It is worth interrogating what those reasons are. Sometimes the reason is just that it's really good. It is also just worth keeping in mind that another large reason why things get popular doesn't have much to do with the thing's quality or even contents, really, and is entirely a sort of social thing. And that if you are a person who doesn't experience this, hi, welcome. Just know that there is a large group of people who are doing something very different. That's all. Sorry, asymptomatic, you had some examples. Like if I have a beautiful romantic tricycle that is just about to tip over to one side. Oh, okay, yes, right, a triangle. And then a fourth wheel comes in and hard resets everything. That is going to make me lose faith. I guess my point is that that's just bad writing, though. Like, that would always be bad writing. There are people that enjoy that, but they are desperate for romance. It is bad to reset the stakes of a romance that you had going for so long, unless there are extenuating circumstances. Like, that just is a bad thing to do. I don't know. I agree with you, but I feel like that it's almost like I would say everybody ought to dislike that, but there are some extenuating circumstances that mean some people will insist they like that anyway, even though it arguably doesn't obey the rules of entertainment and really shouldn't be something other people like. Shouldn't, according to, I don't know, focusing only on the entertainment value of the piece and not other things like, do I need to say I like this to be part of the conversation, or things like that. Yeah, again, just to be clear, I shouldn't have, I was only using a specific example to illustrate, I could have just made up an example. This specific person, there could be any number of weird reasons why somebody like just couldn't stand there being a character like that in their Stormlight Archive book, and it's fine. I would never bring up the person's name, or we're not trying to pick on that person. It doesn't matter. It was just an example of a type of perspective that I think a lot of people will meet and go, that I guess there are people who are just that bothered by that, and it's like, well, maybe, but also I feel like it's way more likely that they just didn't really like the book itself that much to begin with, and this just gave them a negative enough thing that they decided, if I'm gonna make this a cardboard cutout of my personality, I don't want to include this part, so I'll stop. And does that really mean that for the raw enjoyment of the quality of the book, they really thought that was that big of a deal? Probably no. Probably it was something else. It was probably that they weren't really reading the book for that in the first place, or they have a specific extenuating circumstance that's a hang-up. That's fine. You know, that's not weird. Incidentally, the tea's done. Let's go kill what's-her-face. Yeah. Now, right quick, we can just zip, zap, zoop. But yeah, for sure. I personally can relate to this in a way I didn't get into during this discussion. I have some complaints about specific types of characters in fiction that I personally feel like very few other people do. Except that I would argue that it actually is kind of like there is some problem with that. It's not just that I personally dislike them. I feel it is questionable that it is so widespread, but that's the way the world is. I'm not questioning that people relate to that. I think the thing that bothers me is just when people are bothered by these parts of media and like genuinely cannot think of why somebody else would enjoy it. Like, that's usually really obvious. Oh god, that was a really obvious attack to not successfully dodge. Yowza. Yoink. Oh, really good Dragonclaw in my opinion, but good position. This weapon always has longer range than I remember it having. Oh. Dude, the team made me worse. I find this very good against enemies like this. Okay, it didn't work that well. It immediately dies. Nice. We should also probably use Frenzied Burst more. That would likely be okay here. I will have you know the cardboard cutout of my personality is waxed to be water and insult resistant. That's a very advanced technique, asymptomatic. Well done. Just to say that, and we all kind of have one of these, right? It's not really to overly malign the existence of such a thing, but just to say, to have some criticism available to reconcile, like, that doesn't, it's sort of hard to believe that would bother someone that much. Like, well, what could be the reasons? And I was only meaning to over-explain one of them that I think people often miss, not to say that's what it is at all. So, didn't mean to go on. White Blind, welcome back. We were just finishing up a discussion about why people like things, pretty much. And how there are some not straightforward reasons why people like things that do not at all have to do with their quality. The reasons people like things that don't have to do with the thing's quality. And for no reason at all, Elden Ring seems to... What's this doing here? Elden Ring seems to be up... No, I think this is a great game in many ways, but as with anything popular, there's a melange of different reasons why people are attached to it, and lots of them don't have to do with how good it is. Just for example, I personally feel like a lot of the value I got from playing Elden Ring, or have gotten, is from not having played the other Souls-likes and finding them not liking the like slamming your face against the boss-iness that I feel like some games in the Souls-like genre are asking of you. I don't find that interesting. But then I had a really good experience with Lies of P, where I was able to adapt to each of the bosses and had a very good time. But I found that too easy. That game rewarded that too hard, was my opinion. Once I was willing to just do anything in the game's build system that made the boss fight go better, I felt like I obliterated most of the game's difficulty. And it went from being like a fun difficulty to at times being a little too easy. I'm trying to get some status off because I probably won't win this time, and I just want to know what statuses will work on this boss. That was a horrible time to flask. I'm really interested in the Lies of P DLC, yes, Mr. Fu. Mostly from a design perspective, though. I don't really want more general Souls-like right now, but I really want to see what they did with that. It's a little bit like Hades 2. I do really like Hades 2, but I could dislike it a lot and I would still want to experience it just because I really want to see what they'll do next with that design, or what they did do next. And indeed, I do think it was very, very interesting. If you're interested in the game design of Hades 2, I personally don't think you will be very disappointed. There's a lot to be excited about there. A lot of stuff that you don't often get to see these types of developers do, and I was delighted to see that they had done. This is going worse than I thought. Okay, I'm also dodging worse than anyone has ever dodged. I did lose 6,000 runes there as well, which is not super ideal. I feel like this is significantly harder than if we just went back and killed Rennala. So... And I do feel like there's also a whole other side of this conversation, which we're just touching on now a little bit, where... like the... yeah, White Blind, a lot of the conversation we were having over the course of the stream for the past few hours has been about, you said funny, because I think people don't usually like things as per se. And if you're talking about anything like what I think you're talking about, I wholeheartedly agree. Right, it's often not really about the thing, I guess, is what I would say as a pitch. And there's a whole separate interesting aspect of this discussion, which is when you actually do like something because of the thing and not peripheral elements, like you feel like you want to be part of the conversation around the thing, or you just really specifically wanted a certain thing like that right now, or a really important topic we haven't talked about at all during this stream that I would describe as like routing or ramps to a subject, where you just encounter a thing, a game, for example, at a very specific time where its matchup is very favorable with you. In other words, if you encountered things in a different order, you very well might not have liked it very much. But you encountered it in the right order for you anyway. There's a whole other science of like what in games do we enjoy, or like how can you pinpoint the moment in a game like Elden Ring, for example, where the player actually begins to have fun. Like what parts were needed to create the fun the player had. This is funny also when you think about games with their board of directors, the money-making people trying to say like, well, what parts of the game are necessary? And it's like, that's like asking if like what the unifying theory of physics is. You know, we sort of don't know, and a lot of people will say they know and then make a game that feels like a lifeless husk because we don't know. I think that's fascinating. Like, that's just a really interesting topic of discussion. We're doing it first try, folks, and by first try I mean I died earlier in the stream doing this, so let's see how it goes now. Strength 18 butts. I'm using this claymore. I mean, everyone has their own taste. It's like food. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up that topic, though. I do still think people are very dismissive of, like, what actually constructs something being good. It's not an unknowable ephemera why people like things, and many things about people's taste are not at all an innate quality that, everyone has their own of, but are instead completely changeable, and people just don't like to change it sometimes. They like having it be that they are these qualities, but they're not actually those qualities. You can change most things about your taste, or I shouldn't really say most, right? Some unknowable amount of things about your taste. You can definitely acquire tastes, and when people have specific things they like or dislike, it is often not due to some innate quality. It's often significantly due to, like, they grew up with it, or they have not a nostalgic feeling for it. To say that that's not their taste is wrong, certainly. But it also seems reductive to say that they need to only like those things. They probably don't. They could have, and maybe still could, like other things as well. Again, I just usually in polite conversation, you leave this alone, and people just accept that people are only going to do that when they're ready, and so there's no point treating it like this. But in an actual discussion for people willing to consider changing, yeah, it's debatable how much we have our own tastes. Like, to some extent, I think not exactly. A really good example of this for me would be something like when you go out for drinks with people. If you try drinks with people, you will find that people will say that they don't like acid, or that they prefer a drink that isn't as citrusy or whatever, or a drink that isn't as strong. When in reality, if you test this with people, which I have had the good fortune of being able to do, yeah, it's surprisingly not objective, like everyone likes the same thing. But the example I always give is with 3 daiquiris. Like, if you make a daiquiri, a rum, simple syrup, and lime juice cocktail, and you give it to somebody, they'll, let's say, to simplify, they will either say they like it, or they think it's too sweet, or they think it's too sour. They might also think it's too boozy, but let's put that one aside. You don't use, an excessive amount of alcohol. But then if you make them another daiquiri and you adapt to what they said, my experience has been that almost everybody prefers a daiquiri that is less acidic, less lime, but has lime in it still, even if they claim that they just don't like lime juice, or they don't like acid, or they don't like acidic things. They do often like a version of the daiquiri that is balanced for someone who has a lower tolerance for acid. And the same thing with sweetness. I personally don't tolerate as much sweetness as other people, and so often I won't like that daiquiri, but if you just reduce the simple syrup to the point where the balance worked for me, I would like it. And it isn't at all that I don't like it being sweetened. It still needs to be sweetened. Upon inspection, I just have a different benchmark for that. So we all have our own taste, but a lot of people think of that as, that means I just inherently don't like this, that, and the other thing, when in fact, usually it's just a slightly different version of that people will like. Or, another way to think of this is not to say that people don't have inherent tastes, like the cilantro thing is the example people always give. Some people just have a genetic disposition where they will taste cilantro as soap. And if you have this, you have to believe me that other people do not taste the same thing. They taste a different thing. Their taste buds fire in a different way, but when we drink things or eat things, we still have a different flavor experience created in our brain. It's just more corrected by what our sensory data gave us, rather than being completely separate. Our sensory data fired totally different things. We all have different taste buds, so it fires differently to an extent every time. But what I'm saying is that I think people overestimate how subjective it is, how much people just have their own individual taste that other people cannot access. I think that is significantly not true. It is partially true. There's no getting around that. But if you drink a beer or you try tea and you don't like it, and another person does, I think it's much more useful than people give it credit for to say, well, why? Like, if it tastes disgusting to me, why does this other person like it? Or why do they say they like it? They might not like it. And they have some reason why they feel like they should say they like it, or they have a nostalgia for it, or the goodness is coming from somewhere other than the taste is what nostalgia would be, I would say. And they might experience that as taste as well. Etc. That kind of stuff. That's what I mean when I say I think everyone has their own taste is less true than people often say it as, even though it obviously is true to an extent. And it is helpful to think that, because it suggests that we can usually share things we enjoy with other people. We often just need to go outside the box to figure out how to do that. And I will continue to take the trend of being against the, no offense at all, by the way, what you said is totally reasonable, kind of magic thinking that people do, where they often treat it like, well, socially I have to leave other people's preferences alone. But I mean, you don't have to here. We have a whole stream where we're happy to just go at it and respect each other's preferences at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, if we're being real, like, why do people... I mean, people don't like that different food. If you think about like the grocery industry, for example, there are things that a surprising majority of people all enjoy. So yeah, we do each have our own taste, but like a lot of people agree on a suspiciously large number of those points of taste. And I think that's a hint that maybe it's not as subjective as people give it credit for, or people act like it is. It is less subjective than it seems, is I guess all that really means. Maybe that seems like a weak claim, but I think it's useful. When the more useful version of it is to say, if I like a book or I like a game that you don't enjoy, because it is probably less tied up in genetics, like your taste buds, for example, you probably could enjoy it. And we're left to ask, how did I enjoy it? Not like, why do I like it necessarily, but how did I get to the point where I enjoy it? It might be a way that somebody else can't get to. For example, I think some of the reason that I like Elden Ring the way I do is that I have not played the other Souls games, but I know of them very heavily. And that I mentioned earlier that I played Lies of P soon before it. I think that really primed me to like a game like this. Some of that is coming from my specific path through those experiences, but it's not unique to me to have had that experience at all. It's specific, it's kind of unique, but you could go play Lies of P before playing Elden Ring and have a somewhat similar perspective on Buildcraft to me. If you haven't played Lies of P or the other Souls games, but you know of them, you know what I mean? It's not unique to me. It is specific, but it is copyable. That's the key difference. Like, you could go do that and you might have a surprisingly similar experience. Right. And Feather, this is a good thing to bring in, that a lot of people's experience of taste is tied up in context. Like, it could remind you of a bad taste or a good time, but you can attempt to emulate context. Sometimes. You can't always, but sometimes you can. And I would insist that it is very, very exciting to suggest that you can emulate context, because it suggests that you can have other good experiences other people had a lot of the time. Anyway, therefore, something that is good would then be something that you enjoy less because of context, if you can detect that. That's really good, because that suggests that if other people play it or, read it or eat it or whatever, they're more likely to just like it without needing any particular build up to enjoy it. If no one has any baggage attached to it and somebody likes it, the odds that the reason they like it comes from something personal are lower, which is a good sign that it just is good. This is one reason why, ironically, maybe things in the public sphere are not always as reliably good as they would seem like they would be, because the general public has very shared experiences, right? It doesn't make at all sense to say, oh, well, that means if a lot of people like something, that means it's more objectively good, right? Well, in general, sure, but if it's the general population, surprisingly, it really might all be for the same context, the same contextual reason, or very few similar contextual reasons, which I think is fascinating. That means that the number of people experiencing it means surprisingly little to how likely it is to be a contextless thing that people enjoy, or less contextual. And all we can really do is try to break down what the context is that people are enjoying it with. A few people trying to lab out why they enjoyed something based on context and trace it back could do some serious work in figuring out how would you enjoy this? Not why did I enjoy this, but how could one enjoy this, or make it more likely they'd enjoy this? Which I think is really fascinating. And it's sort of delightfully actionable. Like, you can do this. It takes some doing, but you can, if it succeeds, you could just copy other people's positive experiences. Kind of. You can like Xerox other people's positive experiences, right? Copy is a very strong word, but you can fax a picture of your ass to people with your experiences. So, good. I guess you could decide for yourself how you think. Maybe you don't think that's good. But that was a good prompt, White Blind. That's what I mean by being able to kind of share or acquire other people's experiences. I think it is less objective than it often seems, or less subjective than it often seems. Which is not to say not subjective. It still is. Again, the key difference is that it's often not completely unique, which means that you could emulate it. It is still often specific. And yes, I think for a lot of people, it is often impractical to follow their people's experiences. But for somebody willing to dig into what those experiences were, yeah, it might be surprisingly doable to like go on the same path. Some places will only take facts. Please just let me send an email. Yes, another thing you can do is email your experiences to I know it's a side joke, but I thought it was funny that, okay, so now let's try. You've Xeroxed your experiences to people. Feather, you said, yeah, I'd agree that's an exciting way of wording it, though we are getting into some Blade Runner territory with that wording. Sure. There are also negative implications to this, or you could see them as negative, and some troubling humanism moments where, like, there isn't much to what actually makes us who we are. If you could have the exact same starting parameters as me, and vaguely similar whatever about me is from my genetics, probably surprisingly little, but some things, and for some of them, it's like you need something in the ballpark, like you need to be comfortable with a relatively large number of minutia information, like the different items in Elden Ring and stats and stuff, and like how stats scale and things. Some of that is your brain, and so we give you something similar enough to that. It doesn't have to be the same thing as I have, but something similar enough. And then, like, also you have a similar lead up, you play similar games, and probably at similar times, so now we're just shaping your entire childhood, but you don't need to go this far most of the time, is the good sign. Then you probably can have the exact same experience, and there's no like magical thing engraved on your soul that forces it to be a certain way. EXP share is an important item to facilitate bringing others to a higher level. Currently using Lucky Egg, but thanks. Okay. Classic. Good job. We killed Rennala. Good talk. Was it though? Fantastic. We got a lot of runes, and we got more runes than it looks like we did because we can boof Rennala's thingy for extra runes. That's another 20k. One more vigor, definitely want more mind. That's become a serious issue. In fact, let's just take 2 points of mind. I'm not super feeling like endurance is necessary. And yeah, I don't really know about the rest. Let's hold for now. And I'll think off the stream about who we can. Let's just do another point of mind. That's been a pretty big issue so far. And now we can respec. Now, I'm just going to briefly talk about this because it's not entirely clear what we should do with this. And we have to get a larval tier, but that's easy. We'll do that on stream next time. This means that you can, so the way it works in Elden Ring is you can take your stats you've allocated and reallocate them. You cannot save any runes this way. You have to reallocate every stat point. And you can't reallocate stat points from your like character origin or whatever you want to call them. So we started as a wretch this playthrough, which makes it very easy. I have 10 base in every stat, and I cannot like drain those stat points, right? But everything else will go back to 10, and I will get, because I'm level 49 and wretches start at level 1, I will get 48 level ups. I have to spend all of them, but I can spend them however I want. I don't have to go back to a certain threshold or whatever. Mostly it's the same as what you would expect from a respec. The main thing is just that a lot of games will let you not spend all of the respec, and this game doesn't let you do that. It doesn't like especially matter, but that is a quibble, a weird thing about this. So likely what we want to do now is we're at a point where we want to focus the build. I splashed some strength and dexterity and no intelligence, good early game, to be able to use like certain weapons, but now it's probably time to go get a proper coherent weapon that we want to use with spellcasting. And we're getting to the beginning of you could mostly spellcast as long as you have like a stick to hit people with, you know, out of combat. Which means we want to build way more faith in arcane. This build is about to get a rather large damage spike, probably about 10 levels worth of damage spike, which will also get us to some soft early breakpoints for faith in arcane. So a lot of damage, but also a lot of the incantations that require faith in arcane are available now. Mr. Fu, you said, I believe it's worth investing into faith in arcane until you can use Grail's Roar. That's a great spell, and you don't really need more stats than that to clear the game. For a general build, yes, I do think that that's a really good breakpoint. Grail's Roar is a really interesting spell we probably will want to use. Next time, we're definitely going to the other Dragon Communion Church, which I already have unlocked, to get some stuff. In fact, hold on. If we can just get it now, that would be way better than talking about it abstractly. But we're winding down. I'm just finishing up with the rather longer stream from today. Probably have Dragon Hearts, too. Not enough, but we can get them. Very close to enough faith. After the respec, we'll have enough. And then arcane, we're fine. This is really good. It's a pretty long wind up, but then it's got a big damage, big stagger damage. I forget about the stagger damage, actually. And then it gives enemies a debuff. But it takes 2 slots to equip. Now, at this early part of the game, or early medium part of the game, and with this janky-ass build situation where we're using mostly status incantations, 2 spell slots? Please, who cares? Like, there aren't any good spells for this build to use, so you could just use normal faith spells, but it's not much of a loss to occupy 2 spell slots when we have this jank fest of a spell lineup. That's completely fine at this point in the game. And it's a really interesting spell. It's somewhat greedy, but if we're going to use a weapon that allows you to use Endure, Ash of War Endure, to avoid getting staggered, that alleviates most of the difficulty of casting it, so that will be gone very quickly as well. Right, Ivar, I just meant more spell slots in the grand scheme of things. Assuming that you have all of the spell slots, which is 10, right? Or around there. There are builds for which 2 has some consequences, especially for incantations where there's a lot of good buffs. But I don't think that's true for this build, because there's not that many spells that fit the theme of what I'm trying to do. That's all I was trying to imply. We can and will get more spell slots, though we have a lot of them already. But that I meant like in the grand scheme of buildcraft, the opportunity cost of 2 spell slots for a Dragon Communion focused build is, in my opinion, not very high. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, and then for a little while we can focus on mana and HP and stuff, and then build more arcanes. So probably what I will do is like that, Mr. Food. We'll respec to re-establish our points into the stats that the build is actually focused on, get just enough arcane and faith that we can cast Grail's Roar or thereabout. That's a good breakpoint for a lot of other spells too. Like, I believe that amount of faith is the amount that you need to cast like Frenzied Burst, that laser eye thing that we were using before. So that's a very good breakpoint for that. You can cast a lot of good mid-game faith stuff with that amount. Then we can focus on mana and HP for a little while, until we get to good breakpoints for those, and then go back and get more damage later, because this build's damage is so outsized currently. And the Dragon Communion Seal in general, that's what's weird about this playthrough, is just so much damage. And so yes, we are using mostly status incantations, but when I use Dragonclaw, it just hits like a freight train, and we didn't invest that much in it. There's really no need to invest more, for now anyway. So yeah, I mostly agree with you. Just catching back up a little bit more. What is this, like cloning but for life experiences? Yeah, same thing, same guy. That was what we talked about today. J7D, sorry we missed you earlier. You caught us right at the end of a stream, but thanks for tuning in. Hi, how you doing? We were just finishing up killing Rennala and setting up the basics of the rest of the build. And we had finished a brief discussion about how, yes, people do have individual tastes. We talked about good about Elden Ring, good about other games a lot during this stream. But the thesis of a lot of the things I make as entertainment for you all is that people can acquire a lot of other people's enjoyment and preferences. Not that much of those things, not as much as people say, is like forced upon the individual. A lot of it is actually shareable. Obviously, there are things that are specific preferences, but less than people act like there is. I feel most people treat it like almost everything about people is something that other people can never have. It's purely unique to that individual, and there's some magic, basically, that means other people cannot experience that. But I believe this is largely untrue. There are causes to why people feel those ways that we could find most of the time that are not things we can't change most of the time, which means if it's set up for you, you probably can just grab an experience someone else had. That is much of the premise of builds and build systems, is that if you share a build with someone, the reason I enjoy a build I enjoy is not at all unique to me. It's specific to me, but there's a meaningful difference in that it's not like only I would enjoy that, just only a subset of people, which really means only a subset of human experiences would lead you to enjoy that. And that means that if I set it up correctly, or if you set up something correctly for me, we can totally just share each other's enjoyments. Sometimes, not every time, but sometimes. And this is fantastic because it means you can have the best of a lot of worlds rather than just like whatever you can find on your own. It's totally possible if you abandon the idea that we are unique, because we're not, to just have other people's experiences to an extent, which I find delightful if properly equipped, which is very hard. And so I appreciated that we got to have a lot of discussion about that today. Folks, if you enjoyed this, we've been playing this every Thursday, and we will be for quite a while hence. So if you've been enjoying this weird status incantation, right now it's kind of wishy-washy statuses, but we're getting into the point where we can actually do status incantations reliably. Play through. We'd love to have you back. We normally start like 4 hours ago, if you were free about 4 hours ago. We'd love to have you back. And we'll also be here tomorrow for tea time. I'm going to brew out the rest of the tea that we had 1 cup of today. This will go 2 or 3 more times. And I guess clean up the tea brewing setup, because I spilled my tea directly into, I mean, it's designed for that, a wet setup. But I'm going to have to go dump that out. Sometimes I forget. And then 2 days later, I'm like, why does it smell like nice, but sort of like still water also? And it's like, oh, gross, there's still tea in there. This is the stream, so usually I do clean it up, but I have tea here a lot, so it hardly ever goes longer than like 1 day. Really, it's that I have a humidity monitor in the corner, and sometimes it's like 70% humidity, and I go, what? And oh, there's still tea in the tea tray. Right, I'll just go dump that out. That's gross? No, it's fine. You just dump it out. Yeah, so tomorrow we'll have more tea. I'll see you this time next week. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We also got a lot of new people. I missed a good amount of good stuff today, though, folks. It was a rich discussion, which means there were lots of things worth talking about that we didn't get to. If you had something, please put it in the archive parlay. You're not nagging me to come back to it. I want to come back to it. Put it in there, and I'll answer it this time next week as the break during the stream. Thank you for the stream, asymptomatic. Fun flipsy whipsy stream. Flipsy whipsy. Just imagine if we had the bingo cards today. Yeah, that would be interesting. I think that would have been chaotic, but it would have been neat. Asymptomatic also earlier, and please put them in the archive parlay if you want to. You had some other good comments before I didn't get back to. But just that one of them was the consistency of like disliking things because they're popular is not something that you're dying on the hill on. You were just commenting on there can be negatives to everybody raving about a game, and that can make you enjoy it less. That can be something other than just being a hipster sometimes. When it's the utility, I think that's the key difference. Is for you, it's the utility of the thing. It can damage your experience of it. That makes total sense to me. I thought you had good examples about that, so I'm sorry we didn't get back to them more. Time to sell out to big writing tomorrow? Nice. I never sold out to big writing. It might happen tomorrow, though. Talk to you soon. Thanks for the stream.